Welcome to meeting 4512 of Hunters Hill Council. Can I get you all to be upstanding, please? Yeah. I'd like to acknowledge and show my respect for the traditional custodians of the land of elders past, present, and emerging on which this meeting takes place. We have with us Reverend Michael Armstrong, who's going to give the council prayer.
I'll sit or stand? That's right. We'll stay standing. Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation. There is a short reflection, hence why I asked if you might sit, but won't you sit? I do want to say thank you for allowing us to have this time and for inviting various faith traditions to come and offer a moment of prayer and reflection at the beginning. I also want to begin by acknowledging the Wallam other people as traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we meet and honour elders past, present and emerging. In the life of many Christian traditions at this time of year, the church spends a lot of time reflecting on past, present and future things. It seems to be a time where we have a string of feast days, a whole range of events leading up to All Saints' Day, which is on the 1st of November. A feast day which you might understand is of little significance to my parish, being All Saints Hunters Hill. In the past, this day was a day of obligation for Christians to attend. You had to go to church. If you didn't go, then you're in really big trouble. 40 days of penance leading up to Easter. So it was really encouraging that you had to go along. However, it was a day where we particularly remembered those who've gone before us and their tremendous life and their tremendous faith, and many who actually died for it. They became known over time as saints. And St. Paul, in his description of them, in fact, uses the word Santos, or in the Lord's Prayer, we might use the word hallows, which means holy. In more recent times, the evening before All Saints' Day has become known as All Hallows' Eve, or All Saints' Eve, or Halloween, as we probably know it better today. Over time, a great range of different things, and let's say some interesting and strange ideas, have become attached this evening, reflecting perhaps our grappling with the mystery of life and death and what it's all about. That aside, it began as a festival of thanksgiving for the past, especially those who've gone before us, and were an example to us in the present now. Over time, it became a way of remembering loved ones, and the day after All Saints' Day became known as All Souls' Day, where we didn't just remember those who were holy and remembered the whole church, but every part of our life and our journey. One tradition is believed to have originated in the past was the taking of a spark, an ember, a little coal from the church. You take it home around this time of year. It was lit from the Paschal candle, which we light at Easter, and reminds us of Jesus' conquering of death. The ember was carried home inside a turnip or a pumpkin that had been carved out. And you did so because that was the thing that kept it going, and that was the fruit that you had at this time of year, being in the Northern Hemisphere. It was then put in your window where it might glow and help the family remember their loved ones, like lighting a candle today. It also became a sign to others that you had experienced loss, that you had grief in your family. And those who therefore saw that in the window glowing might show love and care to your family as they grieved. And the way that they might do that, as often happens today, is by bringing food. This is perhaps one way in which the present-day jack-o'-lantern perhaps originated. Jack for Jesus and lantern for light. Jesus the light. The trick-or-treating originated from the good origin of bringing food and showing care for those grieving. Why you would trick them, I have no idea, but that became part of the thing later. So as we approach this time of year, we remember those who've gone before us and give thanks for them. I know you often at this council remember those who've passed in Mayoral minutes, and that is most appropriate thing to do, to remember those who we have put our foundations on. And we remember and give thanks for many saints. So at this time, we do give thanks to them when we acknowledge that we have a strong foundation of faithful and generous people in this community, and that we might be aspiring to be like them in the present. We sometimes also remember the past because we don't desire to repeat it, or because perhaps it's a memory that needs healing, both of which bring immense benefits to the future when we confront them. So let me pray for this council as you meet tonight, recognising all who've gone before us and all who make up our community now and our hopes and dreams for the future. So if you pray, I invite you to pray with me. If you don't, you might take a moment to pause and just ponder these things in your heart. Let me pray. God of holy dreaming, great creator spirit, from the dawn of creation, you have given your children the good things of Mother Earth. We bless you for this land, for its contrasts of landscape and climate, for its abundance and opportunities. Give thanks for and remember the Wallamata people, that by your providence you gave this land. We pray for forgiveness for the loss of that proud people. We lament the past and pray in the present we might find healing in order to bring about a new future together with First Nations peoples. Remember too those who settled here in this place, on this sacred land, and we acknowledge that we've benefited greatly from that time. Remember those who sacrificed much, those particularly in our community who fought multiple wars and gave much for our prosperity. Pray now for our community at this time, giving thanks, Lord God, for the many saints who serve you and one another. We place before you, Lord, the many needs of our community, and thank you for all who seek to make a difference. Pray especially at this time for children, that they and their children will be blessed as we have been blessed. Be mindful of them and many children throughout the world who this night face terror and pain, particularly in Ukraine. Pray for this council, staff, the volunteers, our mayor and councillors. Grant them wisdom and insight, understanding and compassion, and the vision of your kingdom. Bless us so that we might be a blessing to others and be declared and called hallowed, Santos, saints in your presence. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Michael. That was fantastic. Councillors, there are no apologies. I do note that Councillor Krasoy, as councillors would know, is representing council at a conference at the moment. I might procedurally just ask for a mover to and seconder to have her attend via Zoom. Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Bagara. All those for, against, carried unanimously. Declarations of interest. There being no declarations, I move to the confirmation of minutes of ordinary meeting 4511 held 20 September 2022. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Quinn. Any discussion? If not, all those in favour? Against? That is unanimous. Moved to Mayoral minutes celebrating the 100th birthday of Kathleen Carlin. I'll read the report. We recognise and celebrate the 100th birthday of Kathleen Carlin. Kathleen was born on the 7th of October 1922 at St Margaret's Hospital in Darlinghurst, the only child of Jessie Madeline Davidson and Robert McKing. She spent most of her youth in Sydney and Melbourne and then moved to Wagga Wagga, where she finished her education at Mount Erin Convent School. Kathleen worked for St Peter's Ice Cream Company, being wartime, joined the Women's Auxiliary Corps. She met Ken Carlin at a ball in Kembley Smith Hall in Wagga Wagga at the end of World War II and married later that year. Kathleen and Ken had 4 children. Kathleen's passion was gardening, and she and Ken created beautiful gardens in their homes that were open to the public for fundraising for decades. She outlived Ken by 26 years and remained in their home independently until only 4 years ago. Kathleen now resides at the Hunters Hill Village. Kathleen celebrated her 100th birthday on the 7th of October at the Hunters Hill Village, surrounded by family and friends. And I was lucky enough to join Kathleen and the residents of the village there and celebrate her 100th birthday last week. So if I could get a move and seconder. Move Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Preston. Any discussion? If not, I'll put it to all those in favour. Against? That is unanimous. I'll now move to item notice of motion, including rescission motions, 3.1 amendment to disposal of council land policy. We have a number of speakers for the motion. I note that we have 3 speakers present, and there are some other submissions that have been provided to you in writing. So I will ask our first speaker, Dr. Sharp, to come to the lectern. Dr. Sharp, you have 3 minutes.
I speak in favour of the motion to reconsider council policy on the disposal of surplus land. In particular, I support the suggestion that land only be considered for sale if the proceeds provide a large margin over the cost of the project. And that margin should include the cost of staff time, advertising, and legal costs. But there's no point selling land unless you gain some financial benefit. And that leaves the critical matter of how we decide what is a satisfactory valuation for land, bearing in mind that the policy requires council to provide the best possible value for residents and ratepayers. It's important to keep this matter of valuation because my limited memory suggests that council has failed to do this in previous years. And almost repeated this failure for the last council meeting. That's only the Nature Strip land at the bottom of Lloyd Avenue, or less than a quarter of the Valuer General's valuation for the adjacent pocket land. In other words, the land is going to be.
Sorry, Dr. Sharp, Tatiana, could you just move the microphone? Councillor Grasso is having some trouble hearing you. Dr. Sharp, apologies.
Thank you. In my opinion, the method of valuation suggested in clauses 4.8 and 4.10 of the draft policy, which was at or above the highest of at least 2 independent valuations, is a good start, but it gives insufficient guidance. I suggest the council amend the policy to state that unless there is an overriding reason, remnant land should not be sold for less than the valuation per square metre of adjacent land as assessed by the Valuer General. And in support of this suggestion, I quote the Valuer General's document called How Do We Value Land, which states that vacant land should be valued on its highest and best permitted use. And I also refer to the Valuation of Land Act of 1916, which states that land should be valued for any purpose for which it was being used or for which it could be used. And this, I think, means land has to be valued at the value of the adjacent property, especially if it's to be sold to the owner of the adjacent property. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. Questions? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. In that assessment of valuation, would you also consider that the development potential that the land could potentially add when the two blocks are amalgamated and the larger area given?
Well, I think that's captured in the Land Act, which says that for any purpose for which it is being used or for which it could be used. So I think back in 1916, they got that nailed.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Vergara.
The Valuation of Land Act of 1916.
Is it qualified? Professional value will have regard to that.
I'm not a professional valuer. I don't know any, so I can't comment on that.
Right, but you're not a professional value, but yet you can comment on the value of the land.
Yes, yes. As a resident, as a potential, I'm told, according to the policy, it's being sold for my benefit, for the benefit of residents. And so, yes, of course, I can comment on that.
But you could also say reasons that you know qualified professional value will have regard to what the rest of them.
I don't know any professional values. I can't say what sort of scoundrels they might be or how respectful they are. You probably know better than I do.
Yeah.
In your line of work.
Councillors, any other questions of Dr. Sharp? If not, thank you, Dr. Sharp.
Thank you.
I now call Mr. Chris Mutton. Thank you, Chris. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to address this council meeting. My name's Chris Mutton and I live in Henley. I speak in favour of the proposed motion to improve the process for management of sales. Council lands that may be considered for sale must be dealt with in a process having the highest levels of probity and one that gives priority to consideration of community values. Assessment of community values should be comprehensive, transparent and consultative. It should, as far as possible, be independent of personal views of affiliations of councillors and the staff. The assessment should precede action to reclassify any lands from community to operational or any process of identifying or negotiating potential purchases. That is community consultation first. Once sold, the lands cannot be recovered. That's very important. Whatever loss of tree canopy, loss of habitat for native birds or other fauna is forever. So we have a duty to protect our environment, both for ourselves and for future generations. This is particularly true in Hunters Hill with its tradition of heritage and preservation. The utility of public lands must be assessed in consultation with the community. Small tracts of land can be of great value, providing pathways and connection, places for recreation, enhancing visual appeal and protecting our environment. The recommendations proposed in the motion take advantage of the excellent model from the Mosman Council. So now to take an example of where the current policy has not served the community well. In March this year, and you'll be familiar with this, no prior notice was given to nearby residents or to the community general regarding the motion in item 4.6 at that time for the proposed subdivision of 1A Crown Street and reclassification of the land from community to operational. Whilst further consideration is being given inside council, there's been no further consultation. There's been still no consultation with the community. Instead, I believe an adjacent resident's been fined for parking on the land, and barriers have been erected with no prior consultation or notice to those owners, residents. This land, by the way, in Henley that I'm talking about, historically known as Bland Street, provides a pathway for local residents to Crown Street, provides a treed corridor protecting native birds, a project which has been sponsored by Hunters Hill Council. It has values which were not even acknowledged in the proposal put to the March 22 meeting. Similarly, I believe the concerns over the land alongside Lloyd Avenue were similarly not appreciated. This community concerns were not appreciated when council initiated action over the sale there. So these examples, in my view, show why the current policy needs revision, the proposal which is before you. I request that council support the recommendations given. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. Just before you go, and I'll ask council's questions in a moment, I just would like to point out that both the Crown Street property and the Lloyd Avenue properties were not dealt with under the current policy that's adopted by council. They were dealt with prior to and not under the auspices of that policy. Neither of those have been assessed under the current policy before council because it was adopted after the period at which it was brought to council.
Yeah, okay.
Councillors, any questions of Chris? Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. So what areas of the current policy, any particular clauses or anything you have concern?
If you look at the statement in the recommendation made by Jim and Ross in this motion, if you just look at that list in the first page, which talks about the things that should be considered, certainly considered. I mean, you will need to make decisions about this, but certainly the things that need to be considered are well listed there, and I don't believe they're covered well in the current policy.
So you're not satisfied with the wording of the current policy?
Look, I'm not a lawyer, please. So
I assume you've read the current policy.
I have. Yes, I have.
So you're not satisfied that is covered in enough detail?
When I read it through, I didn't feel that those themes which were reflected at the front there about respecting community values were sufficiently covered in the document that I read. Yes, the current policy, as was attached to the notice of meeting. Yes.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for speaking tonight. You spoke about the importance of improving the process by which council, considers the sale of it, and I agree with that. And I think that's why we as a council have considered this policy update, have procured a third-party professional who's drafted a number of other similar policies for a few LGAs, which is why we resolved to accept the policy in May as a council. I just wanted to understand, and this kind of follows on from Councillor Quinn's questions, but have you considered, for example, clause 3.1.6 of the policy, which includes, I actually don't think personally that, I mean, I am a lawyer, so perhaps I'm biased, but I do think that the policy is quite digestible. It sets out matters in quite succinct and legible format, but I just wanted to know, because this provides an expansive provision for cultural, natural and heritage preservation.
Yes.
So just to use that as an example, because I understand that you've
place some emphasis on, you know, loss of habitat for native birds, for
Particularly
example.
important to me, yes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but have you read that particular clause?
Well, yes, I have read that, and it just doesn't jump out at me that there will be a process of consultation with the community in advance of the council making the decision. That's the difficulty that I have. It's not so much the question of what decision you will ultimately make. It's the question of, are you consulting with the community at an early enough stage to understand what is the community values?
So you mentioned the list at 1B of the recommendation. You're then satisfied with the considerations that council must have as according to the draft policy, or not, the adopted policy. You're satisfied with those considerations in terms of the natural habitat, you know, flora, fauna, heritage, among other things that are stipulated in that policy.
Those at a high level.
So you're satisfied with that?
At a high level, yes.
You're satisfied with the considerations that council must
Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go to the document.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. But you take issue with the apparent lack of community consultation that council must have.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. The Mayor made reference to the fact that the existing policy didn't come into effect when the reports were prepared for both Lloyd Avenue and also for Land Street. Having looked at that policy, I know you haven't read it in detail, but do you believe that I think that the section that was just referred to, I think might be 3.1.
Yes, 3.1.
I'll find it here, but yeah, okay. Look, it's the section that was referred to in the policy. I think it's
3.16. Was that the one?
Yes,
was referred to.
3.1.
Yeah, it's 13 words. Do you believe that is sufficient to protect the values, and would it have made a difference in the analysis of the proposals for both Land Street and also for Lloyd Avenue?
Again, I don't want to go to the legal part of it because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how these things constrain people in a legal framework. You can understand that. I'm an ordinary resident, okay? What I have is a passion about protecting our environment. What I see is a degree of, in my words, opportunistic approach to dealing with assets that the council has, looking for financial returns to the council without prioritising. It's not so much a question of whether it gets on the list. It's a question of where it fits in the priorities. That's my biggest concern about community values need to be prioritised over financial values. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, I'm not sure how that reflects into what your decision will be. I'm representing this as a community member with passion for looking after, you know, I'm a bush care worker for 20 years in this particular community. We do a great deal of work. We get absolutely destroyed when we see the trees being taken down in Becks Park, right, assumed by a neighbour, okay? That destroys us as bush care workers. So when I see the prospect of us now losing more trees through this particular piece of land in Henley, right, it just breaks my heart. I just want you to understand that passion. Yes, I'm not going to tell you how to write the words, that's your job. But understand my passion, please.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Quinn.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, Chris, just to appease some of your concerns, can I suggest I'm going to read clause 3.3 in the current policy.
In the current policy.
The council
is that the one I'm
adopted.
looking at?
This is about consultation.
That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
So clause 3.3 says, before making a determination that land is surplus to the current or future needs of the council and the local community and has potential for disposal, the council must, 3.3.1, give public notice of the disposal to pass, give public notice of the proposal to pass a resolution that would state that the land is surplus to current or future needs of council and the local community and has potential for disposal.
I understand.
So therefore council is bound to consult. Number two, and then the next one, consider any submission made in response to the public notice given under that clause.
So I understand and I respect that this council has a process of notification on significant matters to the community, giving a period of time for people to come back, for summarising those comments in a document which is presented to council, because I've been through this process. Summarising those, or sorry, including those, not even summarising, including those in documents that come to council. I understand all of that. The difficulty I have with is that the point that you make there is that before making the determination, that is before the council makes that decision, that process will be gone through. What I'm saying is what should be happening is that you should be doing an evaluation of where some opportunities might lie for disposal of property, then doing the consultation, then assessing what the financial outcomes might be, where the opportunities might be to obtain a buyer, etc., etc. What I'm sensing is, and I may be wrong, is that it's the other way around, that opportunities are being assessed from a financial point of view initially, and then it goes out to consultation in a very tightly constrained context where very clearly the community doesn't get a lot of say. You have to believe me, we don't.
I understand what you're saying, and I'd suggest that in the two cases that have come before council this year, that is exactly what happened. And this policy is intended to make sure that doesn't happen again.
I'm looking forward to you guys doing a good job. Guys, people doing a great job. The council doing a great job.
Thank you, Chris. Councillors, any more questions of Mr. Mutton? If not, thank you, Chris.
Thank you for that.
I'd now like to invite our third speaker, Miss Maureen Flowers. Maureen, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of the Friends of Kelly's Bush, currently numbering 65 members. We're fully supportive of the motion put forward by Councillors Sanderson and Williams to amend Council's policy to ensure public interest is prioritised so that remnant lands are retained for the benefit of the community. As the popularity of our much loved Kelly's Bush has demonstrated, access to the natural environment is vitally important to the health and well-being of our community. Whether large or small, each pocket of green space must be preserved in order to maintain and increase biodiversity, provide wildlife corridors and habitat, and offer residents the possibility of a place for quiet contemplation or relaxation in an increasingly stressful world. Council's own Bushland Management Committee has strongly recommended this action, and indeed the Deputy Mayor has written recently about the vital importance of preserving our green space. If our precious land is sold, it's obviously lost to the community forever, and the short-term financial return is minimal compared to the loss to the environment and future generations. We feel there is an urgent need for Council to define, document, maintain, and defend all remaining parcels of land. A proper open space plan is necessary to examine how these spaces can be better utilised and protected. They need to be thoroughly surveyed by an independent ecologist to check for remnant vegetation and to document how their loss might impact habitat corridors. We have a very relevant example of how ignorance could have led to serious degradation of our suburbs' environment in the small triangle of open space on the corner of Ryde Road and Augustin Street. This was potentially under threat and seen as a bit of a nuisance, but subsequently it was identified as part of the endangered ecological community of turpentine ironbark forest. I'd just like to add a personal message from our president, Annabel Kroll, who couldn't be here this evening as she's unwell, but she would like it to be noted that in 2004, the council arranged for a memorial bench chair to be placed at the corner of View Street and Askernall Place. This land is vacant land and was on the site next to the house I grew up.
Sorry, Maureen, movement to
Sorry.
extension of time, councillor Williams, second to councillor Quinn. All those in favour, against, carried.
Thank you. This is from Annabelle as well.
Mm.
My sister Elizabeth committed suicide at the age of 44. Council at the time wanted to show their respects by organising the seat and a place to put my sister's ashes, which were subsequently buried in the ground under the leg of the bench. As time goes on and memories fade, remnant land such as this could be sold off without its history being fully understood, and the memorial to my sister and her resting place could be destroyed. Unfortunately, there are now several areas of public land where community use has already been alienated, and these may be lost forever. There are many such examples, but one is council-controlled land adjacent to Kelly's Bush, which has been breached by a homeowner with built-in structures over many years, a situation which council appears unable to address. Therefore, there is also a need for a properly defined and enforced policy around individual encroachment on common land. Our team of dedicated bush carers and members of the wider community of the Friends of Kelly's Bush strongly urge all our councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Any questions, councillor Quinn?
Yes, Maureen, I'll ask the same question that I asked
Yeah.
the previous speaker in regard. So it's the detail of the policy that we're debating tonight.
Yes.
I think we, certainly from my point of view, and I would suspect all the councillors around this table, the particular parcels of land that you've mentioned there has never been a proposal to get rid of any of them. And I think there would be a similar reaction if there was. I just want to put that there. But in terms of the detail of the policy, because that's what we're debating tonight, clause 3.1. Are there what are the things in clause 3.1 that you object to? Because it covers all of the things, I could read the whole thing out if need be. It covers all of the things that I'm hearing are the concerns that people are raising tonight. And I'm struggling with why there's objection to it.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you can point out to me what in 3.1 is not meeting your
Well, we've got a
expectations.
very simplistic view at Friends of Kelly's Bush. We don't want to see any of the remnant land considered for disposal, basically. We want the whole lot to be protected.
Understood.
Some little parcel of land could actually provide some person with a bit of mental health.
Yeah, understood. Can we go to 3.1?
Yeah.
What in 3.1 is not having that check and balance there?
Well, it does.
Because that's a concern I'm hearing tonight.
It's the prioritisation, from what I can understand, is that it is going to be considered, there could be a remnant land that is considered to be whatever, useless.
Yep.
Now, that point should not even be on the agenda. What we're saying is that we would like to see the remnant land as it is, as it stands, looked after, documented and protected. So no consideration of selling any of it.
No, understood.
Okay.
No consideration of selling any remnant land.
Not from our point of view, the ecological assessment would actually say that that is valuable and that remains valuable from an ecological point of view. But from our point of view, a general piece of land could be valuable in all cases and is valuable as habitat. So none of that land should be sold.
Understood.
Councillor Prieston.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, councillor Quinn, you finished? Yeah,
done.
councillor Prieston.
Thank you, Ms. Flowers. And thank you for the personal anecdote and for mentioning Annabelle Kroll and her sister. That was lovely. I just had a question. Were you aware that this policy in draft form was brought to council in May? Consideration.
We didn't clock it at that time.
Okay, because unfortunately we're at a point in time now where the council has resolved to adopt this policy. This motion moves to amend the policy, but we will have a policy in place, it seems. So is there anything that you would move to amend in the existing policy I understand that you don't want any land sold, so, but do you understand
Well,
what
is there in the policy, is there going to be documented exactly where all of the lands are and what they comprise of with an ecological report, or is that not even on the agenda?
Well, in this proposed amendment, there's, I can't find it now, but there's a list. It proposes a list, right? Yeah. So the amendment proposes that council prepare and maintain a list of parcels of land it may wish to dispose of.
Yeah.
So would you be in favour of that? Is that what you're suggesting? Even, do you know what I'm kind of trying to get at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've just got a very simplistic view, as I said. You know,
Yeah.
every piece of land is precious. It might only be, 2
Yeah,
meters.
I understand. It's just almost a bit after the fact,
Sorry,
which is
it is,
unfortunate.
yes,
But
yeah. Unfortunately, we have come in on the tail end of this. But, we can see by those examples that there could have been, even though, with all due respect, you say it's never going to happen, that some ironbark forest, a tiny bit could be, taken down. But, there is a chance. So that's why I say, why would we take that risk? And when we need bird habitat, we need trees, we need grass, actually, in this climate.
And I completely understand, and I take your point, and I agree, largely I agree. So I think it's important, and to appease you, or to kind of set you at ease, along with your fellow members of the Kelly's Bush friends of Kelly's Bush, I think you should take comfort in the fact that this policy is not exhaustive, i.e. these are pretty much suggested considerations that council must have. That's not exhaustive. So council could resolve to consider multiple other things if the sale of a parcel of land came before the council. It's true. And,
Yes, sure.
had the sale of the View Street Reserve come up before council, and had you, represented on behalf of Annabelle Kroll that is a special place of quiet consideration and goes to honour the passing of her sister, I would, as Councillor Quinn mentioned earlier, I would, suggest that would be highly considered by the council, and therefore that parcel of land would not be considered to be sold. So I think take comfort in the fact that this policy is broad. It is a broad framework, in fact, under which council may consider to dispose of some of its land.
The only thing that I could see with that is that it does put the onus on the ordinary citizens to keep up with exactly what council's doing and when, and checking the business papers.
Yeah.
And of course, these things just don't happen in real life. So I think the thing is that rather than have the onus on the community to always be on the watch for this, no remnant land should be sold. Sorry to repeat myself, but it just makes more sense as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
And of course, there are the other things of the encroachment by people, which I know is not necessarily dealt with here, but there is an encroachment issue as well.
Councillors,
Sorry if it's not quite addressing the
that's
motion,
okay.
but that's our.
Councillors, any more questions of Ms. Flowers? If not, thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
Now, councillors, we have several other written submissions which have all been provided to you today. Do you want a moment to consider these and read them, or I'm slightly in your hands as to how you want to deal with this, because there's a few and we can have them read, but we have been sent them all as submissions today.
I've had no time to read them. I feel like they should be read.
Yeah. I've gone to the trouble to see if they should be read.
The precedents, which we won't deal with tonight, but of submissions being read in this way, was a COVID, something that came up out of COVID. Now, we have not really had this volume of them before. So it's something we're going to have to think about in the future, because I think that as a broad statement, if people want to come and participate at council, that they should either make the time to come in via Zoom, or they should, as our speakers tonight have, at least come to the chamber and put their case forward. But councillors, could I get an understanding of where you'd like for this to land? Would we like them read?
We can suspend standing orders, Mr. Mayor. I move a suspension of standing orders for, say, 3 minutes
Yes,
to allow councillors to.
thank you, councillor
review
Quinn.
this.
Got a seconder? Councillor Prieston, all those in favour? Against? That's carried.
Take me probably 15 minutes. I'm happy to read them out. No dramas. Yes, I'll get you to come here because you're clarity on the gentleman who's on that. In a reader. Going to on fostering.
Councillors, are we all satisfied? It's been about 4 minutes. Not yet. Oh, sorry. Councillors, we all good? We get a motion to move back into open session. Councillor Quinn, second to Councillor Priest, and all those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, we now move to the motion moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Sanderson,
Could I?
you have some amendments?
No. Oh, well, I do, but before I move the motion, could I have a question. Traditionally in this council, if someone prepares a report such as I've done, their name would appear as being the reporting officer. the general manager's name appears in that space. Is there a reason for that?
I would imagine, and I will throw to the general manager, that because you are not a employee of council and the general manager has put a report to as an annexure, or was this the report you authored?
The entire report was either written by me or and all the attachments to it were
Well, then I'll
specified.
I'll throw to the general manager.
I'll refer to the executive officer of governance, Mr. Mayor.
Through the general manager and chair, Councillor Sanderson, the way that our reporting system is set up is such that typically council officers would be the reporting officer. That's generally the case in most councils. Technically, if we were to keep council laws as the reporting officer, when we send through administrative communications, council laws would be received. And that could potentially, I guess, well, from IT perspective, that I'm not, you know, if that's what council wants, then we can try and develop it around.
Councillor Sanderson?
Well, it's unusual. It's, I mean, I know it was done that way at the last meeting, but it's quite different to the policy of this council in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Your motion.
Yes, I will move the motion with the amendments as you indicated. And they are that.
If you could perhaps read your motion with the amendments.
I'll just read the amendments. It'll take some time to get through the motion. The amendments I would like to move, and I believe you get this on the screen now. The amendment I would like to insert point 5. And that is the policy be amended to ensure the future use of land that is disposed of is consistent with council's planning instruments and controls. And at point 6, that the policy be amended to ensure consultation process accord with council's community engagement strategy. That was sent through electronically, so you should be able to find it. Not in the Roman numerals, in the numbers.
I take it the amendments are in red. They need to be inserted. Councillor Sanderson, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is not a topic that I've just become interested in recently. During the term of the last council, we had a community infrastructure plan that I believe was first seen in about September 2020. There was a broad community reaction against that. Later on, it morphed into what was a property strategy or draft property strategy. Even in those documents, they were talking about things that should be considered, and these are not included in this policy. It was pretty scant, but at least they acknowledged points like view corridors and access to water, and they even suggested that we have a list to update the land that might be considered for sale. I've started to develop this at that time, and I proposed other things like access to foreshores, natural areas, parks, sports grounds, and so on. Contribution to linkage between streets and lanes. View corridors was already there. Maintenance of curtilage around heritage items, and to allow planting to improve the tree canopy. And I note that in the minutes of the Bushland Management Committee that are later in tonight's business paper, the Bushland Management Advisory Committee made the point that any land where you can plant a tree is valuable for biodiversity and biodiversity corridors. The policy doesn't go into that sort of detail. As it turned out, when council ultimately decided to defer the community infrastructure plan, or by then it was the draft property strategy. In the end, I had to accept an amendment in order for the motion to survive from then Councillor McLaughlin. Her amendment spoke about having a flow chart. The flow chart would give the opportunity for decisions to be made. So as you go through the flow chart, there'll be items you could consider. If it didn't meet that test, you would reject the proposal. That is the sort of approach I believe that we should have. Up to that time, it seemed that we were considering the front end of a policy about what we would consider before you would even contemplate selling land. We've had the recent proposals that have come up in the term of this council, including Lloyd Avenue and also the one at Henry. Those, has been made clear that those policies or those proposals were brought about without the presence of the current policy. The difficulty, though, is that even with policy, it doesn't really address many of the issues we have to deal with. It doesn't deal with public access. All it does is talks about access to adjoining landowners. It doesn't talk about streetscapes. It doesn't speak about open space. It doesn't talk about curtilage around heritage items. It doesn't talk about subdivision patterns. It doesn't talk about areas for trees and opportunities for plantings to contribute to biodiversity corridors and tree canopy. And the other one where is a huge stumbling point with this policy, it is absolutely silent on the rights of utility providers. Now, by comparison, the Mossman policy picks that up and picks it up very tightly in a much tighter document than we currently have. The existing policy has been pointed out in while people were speaking, was that at clause 3.1.6, it only requires that regard be had to whether the land has cultural, natural or heritage value that should be maintained. Greater detail is clearly needed. Now, in a recent briefing of councillors, we were addressed by one of our residents who has belonged for a long time being a legal advisor to council on development control, Mr. John Cole. It's probably one of the best briefings that I've ever been to as a councillor. Mr. Cole made the point that in our planning instruments, it's not good enough to simply talk about the character of Hunters Hill. The way he put it was to say, well, Ross Williams might know what the character of Hunters Hill is, but a person reading that document doesn't. We need to better explain things. Now, the 13 words that I read earlier don't really define what the character of Hunters Hill is. And clearly, there is a huge amount of public good in our streetscapes, our view corridors, and all these things that make up that character of Hunters Hill. It needs to be better explained. It might be okay for council, but council is not the only user of these policies. These policies have got to be read and understood by people who are making proposals to buy land, by people who are preparing the reports. Now, clearly, the two reports we've had didn't understand any of those values. They need to be far better articulated. Getting on to some of the other points that I make, my feeling is that on objective reading of the report that I've prepared, I don't really see how the proposal can be or this motion cannot be accepted. One of the important things is public interest. In terms of public interest, yes, the policy makes reference to what I refer to in the report as the process and procedure component of public interest. It makes little reference to the objective and outcome part of public interest. Those objectives and outcomes are to maintain the character of Hunters Hill. And we need to be saying in the policy some of the things about what that character is. exactly parallel to the point that Mr. Cole made in the excellent briefing he gave councillors a few weeks ago. Some of the points that need better explanation are access. As I said before, access only relates in the policy to adjoining neighbours. What about all the beautiful little lanes that lead to all sorts of special places in this municipality? What about, you know, you can get, for people that visit here, the pleasure you can get out of wandering down a lane and finding bushland or whatever. View corridors and streetscapes are clearly one of the really defining points about this municipality. You can't summarise that in 13 words as the policy attempts to do. Curtilage around heritage items. Now, again, the 3.1.6 is totally inadequate on that. We had because it says nothing about curtilage around heritage items, we had a proposal where the one in Lloyd Avenue, we proposed that there would be a step out in the front boundary immediately adjacent to an absolutely superb heritage item in Lloyd Avenue. You know, the quality of these reports has to improve, and I don't believe the current policy will do that. And the other thing too is that if we don't better define what the outcomes we want are, we will have a situation where one assessor will assess on one set of values, a different assessor will assess on different sets of values. The result will be we'll get inconsistency of outcome. Consistency of outcome is one of the things that local government must strive for, and it won't come about through the policy that we have at the present time. The other thing that's very important is that the policy, both or the proposals we had, both for Lloyd Avenue, where there was a lot of infrastructure there. I think there's a water main under these there, as well as telco lines. The one at Henley, there's a power pole right in the middle of it. Ports didn't even mention that. One of the things that I'm suggesting in the amendments to the policy would be that we provide a process where we do an early check with the utility providers. Now, under the legislation which I cite in the report, there is a requirement that of notification of these various authorities, and there's a huge string of them. The other thing that hasn't been recognised in the report, and I'm sad that this is not the case because we were told it was drafted by legal experts, but they seem to have some holes in the legal side of it. The big hole in the legal side is that they don't mention anything about section 38C of the Roads Act, which requires that official notification. And with that official notification, any one of those authorities who's listed has the right to say to the council, sorry, we've got an objection. And once you've got that objection, you can no longer sell that land. And you can no longer close the road reserve to enable you to sell the land. There is a right of appeal, that's to the Land and Environment Court, but surely land sales are going to get a bit ridiculous if it gets to the point where we have to go to the Land and Environment Court to justify sales.
Councillor Sanderson, just noting that you're well over 5 minutes. You close to, and then there's right of reply. Yes,
I just have a finishing, and I'll carry on with the right of reply. Look, to conclude at this stage, I think the material I've presented shows that there is a clear need for review of this report, and the council should always be open to review of policy. That is absolutely essential. It's part of our function. Yes, it's a new policy. In my view, it's failed on the first outing. Now, I would hate to see all the hard work I've done over a period of about 2 years go down the drain because it gets amended or whittled away at and becomes ineffective. So I hope other councillors will respect the work that I've done in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Any speakers against Councillor Quinn?
Yes.
Sorry.
I just had a question.
Yes, Councillor Prieston.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sanderson. So considering on the 16th of May, And then again at the last meeting, council spent a considerable amount of time and each councillor a lot of preparation discussing a motion with respect to the disposal of land policy, which was resolved and accepted at that meeting. I just want to know from your perspective as the mover of this motion, why it was withdrawn at the last meeting. With considerable amendments, I might add, when it's brought to us at this meeting.
The principal reason it was withdrawn at the last meeting was that we had the Lloyd Avenue matter, and the Lloyd Avenue matter certainly exposed some weaknesses in the policy. I've developed the motion further in order to deal with those weaknesses.
Despite the fact that at that last meeting, we didn't resolve to sell the land at Lloyd Avenue.
It didn't matter whether we resolved to sell it or not. The report exposed extreme weaknesses in the policy.
Councillors, Councillor Sanderson, can I just again reiterate that the Lloyd Avenue property and the Henley property were not dealt with under the current policy that was adopted by council. The general manager was acting under a resolution of this council to bring that motion back, and quite rightly, Councillor Quinn moved for the Lloyd Avenue property to be dealt with as in accordance with the adopted policy of the council.
With respect, I didn't say anything about the policy being in place. What I said was the Lloyd Avenue matter highlighted weaknesses in the policy. It didn't have to be applied. It's apparent that if you were to attempt to apply the current policy to Lloyd Avenue, there were things that were clearly missed.
Councillors, Councillor Quinn.
So, Mr Mayor, look, I'm going to speak against the motion, and I'm going to foreshadow that council prepares and maintains a list of parcels of land it may wish to dispose of in accordance with council's disposal of land policy, which is effectively clause number 5 of what Councillor Sanderson has put in his notice of motion tonight. The reason I'm speaking against this, and I can't emphasise this enough, the two properties that seem to have really stirred up this issue are the property at Crown Street and the property at 10 Lloyd Avenue, both of which were brought to this council by the previous administration, not by the current general manager and his team, but by the previous administration, without any notice to councillors. So those two matters took us by surprise totally, and we reacted to that. And one of those reactions was, we need a policy. And we moved a resolution that was adopted that council get a policy for the disposal of council land. The general manager acted on that, and we now have a policy which has been reviewed by this council and passed by the majority of this council, not by the whole council. It was a 5-2 vote to pass that policy, but it was adopted by this council. Sorry, someone was missing that night. Okay, so 4-2. Okay. Now, I just can't emphasise that enough about those two properties, and I know a lot of you that are here tonight that have spoken about it have referred to those two properties. The policy that we now have in place will not let happen what happened with those two properties. Council engaged eminent legal advice, very experienced lawyer that has done this for several local government areas, and the policy was drafted, reviewed by council, and it was adopted at the council meeting on the 16th of May. Now, in that policy, clause 3.1 is very explicit in many ways, and I encourage everyone to read the detail of that policy. And I respectfully suggest, Mr Mayor, that I don't think everybody has read the policy that they're possibly objecting to. So I suggest that people really need to read the detail that's in that policy. It is available on council's website. I particularly refer to clause 3, which goes through the details of identifying land with potential for disposal, and then clause 4, and then there's heaps of things underneath that. Then clause 4 sets out the process also for a decision to dispose of land and the disposal methods. So there is quite a bit of detail in the policy that goes through how council must go about that. The policy obliges this council to publicly notify residents of a proposal And that's before any consideration of a formal decision to sell land. So the policy already obliges us to do that. We weren't in that position with Crown Street or Lloyd Avenue because the policy wasn't in place when those two started. Now, a lot of what Councillor Sanderson has put in his motion tonight, I totally understand the detail of what's there and all the matters to be considered. But I personally don't think it's realistic for us to have a policy that's going to cover this, every possible detail, because there will be some that will be missed. There will be some that will be missed. What the lawyer has put in this document is the higher level considerations that must be adhered to. There's reference there to impacts on the natural environment, for example. There's reference to heritage, etc. They're in the document, and any assessment, any proposal to deal with those parcels of land must be considered. And that's when you start drilling into the detail. Also, each proposal has to come back to this council for its initial consideration. And then it gets tested, first of all, as a possibility. Then it goes out to public consultation. That's when we'll start to hear about all of the other issues and concerns that aren't clearly articulated in the policy. But people will come and tell us, as this community has always done. And that's when we'll get a sense of, is this the right thing to do or is it not the right thing to do? As a starting point, once we get that list, for example, because I couldn't tell you what all the remnant pieces of land are in Hunters Hill LGA. I know there has been a list in the past. But some of those lists, when I look at, I'm going to say, no way. But we need to have that list as a starting point. Then, once that the council decides, okay, well, maybe, we then test that with the community through that consultation process, which is set out already in the policy that we adopted on the 16th of May. Mr. Mayor, I have significant confidence in the document as it currently exists. And I think for us to make it so specific and lock us into such minute detail that we are going to be fraught in the future. We do have to allow for assessments to take place, which will consider all of the issues and will also allow other issues to come forth during the community consultation process.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Councillor Priest, before I do, just for those of you in the gallery, can we just listen to councillors and give them the due respect of being heard? Councillor Prieston.
Sorry, just a question before I speak against the motion. Are we speaking against the amendment to the motion?
No, the amendment has become the motion because it moved by, no, that's a foreshadowed. Councillor Quinn foreshadowed, you moved a motion with amendment and the second, Councillor Williams, I assume agrees with the amended version of the motion. So the motion as it stands is Councillor Sanderson's original motion with the two amendments that he's added this evening.
So I'd like to speak against the motion, please.
Just before you do, any speakers for? Against? Councillor Prieston.
Thank you. Firstly, in regards to the amendments, I just wanted to highlight that my interpretation of clause 3.1.1 of the policy as it stands urges council to consider whether the land is obliges council to consider whether the land is necessary to meet operational needs. I would interpret operational needs to be, for example, utility services that exist on that land, firstly. That leads me to the motion as a whole. So I think there's a lot of literature. The most recent that comes to my mind is that by the Australian Law Reform Commission this year, which sets out kind of a paper about the principles of good legislature. It talks a lot about the removal of complexity and minutiae of acts. And I believe that this policy, and I agree with Councillor Quinn's remarks earlier, needs to be flexible. It needs to be flexible enough to meet the needs of new situations, new circumstances, which we see as we go on, occurs day in, day out. And it must be consistent with overarching principles of the policy as a whole. And this is what the Australian Law Reform Commission does highlight to excess. I think that as Councillor Quinn mentioned, the more that we delve into particulars, the more scope there is for an interpreter of this policy to say, well, given that the policy is so prescriptive, how come you've not mentioned X, or how come you've not mentioned Y? And therefore, given that the policy is silent on those things, we will not consider that. That's just how the interpretation of legislature works. The broader that a policy is, the removal of complexities and minutiae, as the Australian Law Reform Commission has highlighted, does us a service in allowing a broad interpretation of policy. I could go through, as Councillor Quinn has done, every single section of this policy that we've adopted in May as a council that goes to every single recommendation at 1B, subclauses I to IX. But I won't, because that is a gross misuse of our time, given that we have spent so much time as a council considering, preparing for and discussing this motion. But what I will say is that I think this all comes back to clause 3.2, which says that the list of matters that council has to consider in its potential disposal of some land is not exhaustive. So that is the golden ticket. That is purposefully drafted. That means that as a councillor considering the adoption of that policy, each time that it comes before council, can consider a number of different other things. That's where I think I'll leave it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any speakers for councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Before I get on to the motion here, I'd like to make an observation, and I would like to apologise to the community who've come along here tonight to present in good faith their opinions, to then be subjected to a whole series of questions. And we don't do it that way in Hunters Hill. People come.
Sorry, councillor Williams, what are you referring to being subject to questions?
The way that the council had responded to the honest views of the public.
If you go to our code of meeting practice, any member of the public that attends our meeting and makes a request to speak, councillors are given the opportunity to ask them questions, and that is in the code of meeting practice of this council.
Yes, but not to go for a long prelude.
It is not exhaustive, as councillor Prieston has just used the term. It is in our code of meeting practice that is the way that the business of this council is conducted.
Yes. Anyway, I disagree with the way.
Well, that is in the code, councillor Williams.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I disagree. The other issue.
You disagree with it, whether or not it's in the code?
No.
Or you disagree with the policy?
The intent.
Okay, thank you.
The community was dealt with.
Are you suggesting a breach of the
Councillor Prieston.
The second issue I'd like to raise is that council wasn't given a chance to talk about or debate the issue when we go into to step out of council. The point I'd like to make is that community have, in good faith, provided written submissions. I spent my time this afternoon reading them once I got them. But the point is that up until tonight, the expectation of the community, whether it's driven by COVID or whatever, was that if they put a submission in writing, that it would be heard. And it hasn't been heard, it hasn't been read into the business of the council. So I do strenuously object to the way that that matter has been handled. Now, moving on to the motion before us tonight, I fully support the outstanding work that Councillor Sanderson puts into his motions. The documentation and the detail which he goes to is impeccable, and I congratulate him on that. And I'm always proud to support the motion, and particularly this motion. The issue here, it seems to be the council is scared to improve on what is put in place. I'll be honest, I voted against this policy because I don't believe the council should be in the position of selling off its land for private gain. Public interest should be prioritised. We heard that from one of the speakers here tonight. I share that view, and I've looked across all the parcels of land in Hunters Hill. Pretty easy to find. It's not a big place. I can't see any that really will have merit to be sold for private gain. The issue that we've got here tonight is one that we can either put our head in the sand and not try and improve things. We've seen in the documentation here another view which Mosman Council has of the way these matters should be dealt with. Just because we've had one lawyer provide us with details based on their experience in a couple of councils, we close our mind to what the opportunities other councils can offer us. And I think this motion here tonight does provide us with a much more solid base and an ability for us to be able to assess these matters when they come to council in a better way. We've heard the issue tonight about Bland Street. Lloyd Avenue has not gone through this process. But haven't we heard tonight, and haven't we heard in the street, that people just don't want us to be selling off these parcels of land. They don't see the logic in it, no matter how much you try to justify it through policy, and you keep the policy as broad as possible to ensure that nothing gets stopped. The detail which was in this motion comes some way to addressing some of the gaps in the current policy. I think it's important that this council be open-minded enough and adult enough to be prepared to accept some improvements on what I think is pretty ordinary policy as it's currently passed by council. So we get to the point now of it looks like most of the councillors are not going to support this, but I do urge councillors to look to the benefit which these amendments or changes to the policy can add to the whole process, the value add which it gives. And as I said at the start, I don't agree that there are any, if not few, places that would conform to community's expectation of this policy. I think a lot of us have read Killing Sydney by Elizabeth Farley. And I'll just quote in chapter 3, where she goes at great length about public versus private interest. She says, the law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from the common, but leaves the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. And I think that sums up where we are with this policy. And I think it's important and imperative that this council accept the amendments here so that the community has some further confidence that the policy will meet its interests. So again, I urge council to make sure that public interest is our priority.
Thank you, councillor. Any other speakers against the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I have
Sorry,
a question already.
Yes, councillor Crasso, one moment, if I could, just for the purpose of minute taking. Councillor Quinn, could I get the exact wording of your foreshadowed motion? Sorry, wasn't captured prior.
Oh, you want me to read it out? Sorry,
If you could, or if you want,
Okay, so look,
councillor, if you want to hand it up, then that's fine.
If you just want to, it's clause 5 of what councillor Sanderson has proposed, except not the introduction of clause 5. So it reads that council prepare and maintain a list of parcels of land it may wish to dispose of, in accordance with council's disposal of land, of council land policy.
That's it. Thank you, councillor Quinn. Sorry, councillor Crassor, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of questions actually, but I've lost track because I've been collating them all. Just some of the things that have really been raised quite late in the game, and as I'm not in person in Sydney and I've been in this conference all day, I haven't had the opportunity to ask some of them, and also some of the questions people have raised in the gallery that I would just like perhaps the General Manager or through you, Mr. Mayor, apologies, to offer assurance on. One is the planning instruments speaking to the policy. I would have thought the planning instruments already dictated what would happen on those lands, would it not? That's question one. The other question is utilities and the utilities under the Act and roads under the Act notifications. I would have thought that because both of them already have acts saying that anything that happens on them requires notification to them, would mean that it wouldn't need to be in our policy because it's already under the Act. So if we're going to do anything on those, on lands that those utilities and roads oversee, it would be our obligation to notify them. Anyway, they're my first few questions, just to get the ball rolling.
So, to the General Manager, the first question, which pertained to the instrument, LEP and DCP instruments, I assume planning instruments, to their application over remnant lands.
Acting Director of Planning.
Acting Director of Planning.
Any application to council would be notified to the public and advertised according to our policy and our DCP.
Councillor Stat, that answer your question?
So just depending on the area, whatever is in the LEP over that land is what it's sold as under, correct? Or
Yeah, it would be if it's. I mean, it depends on the zoning of that land. So if it's rezoned to be used as that purpose, then we applied those instruments to that land, and then we advertise the application to the public, and then we make an assessment as per our LEP and DCP.
thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. And the second point, General Manager?
We'll just get the Deputy Mayor to.
Sorry, if you could repeat the second question, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry.
Thank you. So there were a couple of last minute amendments about notifying utilities, and I'm sorry because I'm on a laptop and I'm trying to scroll through the amendments and the business paper, but there are a couple of last minute amendments about notifying utilities, and Councillor Sanderson spoke about the Roads Act requiring notification if we're, I think it was something about it's our obligation or it's our duty to report to those overseers. I can't quite remember the language, but I would have thought if it was already required under the Act that our policy doesn't need to say we have to do it because we already have to do it under the Act. Does that make sense?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, Mr. Mayor.
I can answer.
Is that the case?
Okay. Generally speaking, any impact on utilities would be broadly considered of any assessment of a remnant land. That would be 101 practical application for the officers in regard to that assessment. And that's broadly covered in many components of the current adopted policy.
Councillor Crasso, you have more questions?
So in a nutshell, any professional doing their job, which is what council, the General Manager is employed to do, would be doing their job correctly. And
well, through you, Mr. Mayor,
doing that.
Common sense would say that any assessment of remnant land at any point in time would give due consideration to utilities. And
in regards to, it has been stated a couple of times tonight, in regards to Lloyd Avenue, that assessment was done prior to this policy being adopted.
Councillor Crassoy, any further questions?
Yeah, thank you. And there's some comments and questions. I'll save comments for debate, I suppose. In the current policy, we say, Councillor Prieston keeps referring to it, that the consideration of heritage, access, community need versus council, etc. How do you demonstrate in presenting a case, in just walk me through it, you either a neighbouring landowner approaches you, or in your assessment you decide there's a piece of land that you think ought to be brought to council for consideration for sale. How do you demonstrate that you've considered heritage, access, etc.? How will that process happen? And the reason I'm asking that question is I guess I'm trying to help people who have commented this evening understand how, even though the policy is broad, the minutiae will be swept up in how you demonstrate it. I guess that's what I'm asking you. How will you show us that you've considered those things when you bring it to us?
Well, I think the simple answer, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the simple answer to that, Deputy Mayor, is that we've got an obligation to bring you detailed information before you make a decision. It's very clearly stated in 4.1, a decision to dispose of land can only be made by council passing a resolution. Now, council would not pass a resolution unless it is happy with the information provided in the assessment report.
All right. And if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to speak against the motion.
Yes.
Once again, regretfully, because if Councillor Sanderson's diligent hard work and thoughtful report writing could be rewarded by winning the day, he would certainly have my full support. But in this instance, the reason council resolved previously to support this this process is policy is because it is comprehensive enough. And the feeling I got from some of the speakers this evening and from some of the community, and quite sadly from some of those written submissions, which were really quite venomous, is that the community, because of these amendments before us, seem unfortunately to have come to the assumption that the existing policy won't protect everything that they're asking us to protect. And it's our job as councillors, as democratically elected councillors, it's our job to ensure that the public interest is prioritised in every decision we make. And so at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. We're not, as someone said, we're not greedily, lining our pockets or throwing out the regard of previous councils before us. And in fact, in my 5.5 years on council, there's been less public land sold, I would say, than ever before. And with this policy, any land that is potentially sold will be sold with rigour. And that's the only other thing I think is really important to point out is this isn't a policy to sell off all our remnant lands. This is a policy to protect the process of the ultimate decision, which is the sale of this land of more use to the community than maintaining it and retaining it. And of course, if there are laneways and pathways and viewways and habitats that are worth preserving, all of that is swept up in this policy. And then it comes to your democratically elected council to consider. And we bring our values to the table, and and I'll thank one of the speakers, I think it was Maureen, for noting that I did recently write a piece in the Weekly Times about the importance of tree canopy. And in fact, the conference that I'm at today talks about increasing tree canopy. The City of Sydney, I think, are trying to increase their tree canopy from 23% to 40%. And they talk about wanting to have a forest in the city, and they quoted Singapore, where Singapore said, we think more along the lines of having a city in the forest. And I imagined Hunters Hill that way. And that is my hope and dream for our suburb, that we will be increasing our tree canopy. We must increase our tree canopy. But that's not to say that if there are parcels of land that are in the interest of our community for council to ultimately, after this rigorous process, decide to dispose of, then it's our job in the interests of our community to do so. Because long-term sustainability is about those three pillars: the social pillar, the environmental pillar, and the economic pillar. And if you can't make all three happen, then you're not going to be sustainable. If we don't manage our operational management of our land well and fiscally wisely, then Hunters Hill will be gobbled up into another council. And we can forget about corridors when people want to start putting up tall buildings here because our little council isn't here anymore to protect us. We must be fiscally wise, but that's not to say we're going to sell off everything. I am fully confident that this policy, sure, some of the wording could have maybe been different, and you can always look at other things and want them better. You know, I've got a coat on and maybe it would have been nicer in a different colour, but at the end of the day, it's quite a good coat and it's serviceable and it does a good job. And you just can't forever be looking at other councils and doing other things. And one day down the track, we might bring it back for a review, as all of our policies should do. But for now, we must get on with the business of good governance, good leadership, and good operations. And we, as Councillor Preston said, have spent far too much time bogged down in this. I'm really excited to learn of a list. And I actually don't want to see a list of properties that we might consider for disposal. I would actually like to see a list of all of our remnant lands and properties that we are responsible for, because how can we possibly be asked in the future to make any decision, policy or no policy, but we do have a policy now, yay. How can we make any decision without being fully aware of what we do have under our care and control? So I'll look forward to hearing more about that. For now, Councillor Sanderson, I so regret that I can't support this motion. You have done really hard work there, and I just believe that the current policy is doing everything you're asking us to do. And I hope the community do understand that I'm making this decision because I believe that everything Councillor Sanderson is proposing is already respectfully covered.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers for the policy? Against? Councillor Bagara.
Thank you. I just want to say that once we vote on this motion, I would like to foreshadow an amendment to council.
We'll do that at the time. Thank you.
But just a few points to clarify. So I endorse everything said by councillors Quinn and Cassaway. Sorry. Just some clarifications on the paper. I would urge councillors to not look at the paper, even though it's well written, uncritically. And the thing I want to raise is that Mossman's policy applies only to road reserves. That is why it has the provisions for notifications. So Division 3 of the Roads Act, which requires notifiable authorities and utilities, relates to closure of road reserves. The Hunters Hill policy specifically excludes the process for closing roads. And importantly, applies to all land in respect of which the fee simple is vested in council. So unlike Mossman Council, Hunters Hill has a efficient, transparent, rigorous process to consider the sale of all land that council is responsible for. Mossman's policy only applies to road reserves. So in fact, we are one better than them to the extent that they have no policy which applies to the sale of land other than road reserves. So let's make that clear. And then in terms of the public interest, I feel public interest is a concept from ancient times. Aristotle spoke about it, Aquinas and Locke. And when people talk about it, they think their interest is the public interest. Let's be clear, it's not. The public interest, which is not a term used in any legislation, for the reason that it is, as the footnote to your paper suggests, a term which is essentially unhelpful because people think the public interest is theirs. Instead, what the Local Government Act requires council's decision-making to do is to recognise the diverse community needs and interests and provide the best value for all residents and ratepayers. I think this policy does that. In relation to the management of land in particular, the Local Government Act specifically sets as the guiding principle meeting the current and future local community needs in an affordable way. The current policy does that. To comply with the Local Government Act principles, we cannot have a policy with respect which predetermines an outcome, i.e. don't sell anything. We need a flexible, efficient and effective policy that allows council to recognise and act in line with the diverse community needs, interests and provides the best value for ratepayers and residents, and this policy does that. But I would like to push out an amendment to Councillor Quinn's motion if it becomes the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanderson, right of reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Councillor Vergara for some of the points she's made. I was fully cognizant of the fact that the Mossman policy only applies to road reserves, but that is a big chunk of the land that we will have for sale. And I believe it should be considered. And I don't see why the material in the Mossman policy can't be used to improve our policy. With respect to the other points that have been made by councillors in argument, I just simply do not accept that clause 3.1 and the 10 points within it, which are inclusive, cover when you're dependent on the 13 words that talk about whether there is heritage or environmental or whatever value that they're advocating for. It needs far greater explanation. The reports that council receives on this will be prepared by people with expertise in leases and licenses and land sales and all the rest of it. They are probably not going to understand the special character of Hunters Hill. I come back to the point that John Cole made in respect of the LEP and DCP. You've got to define what it is you're trying to protect, and the policy clearly doesn't do that. I think, and Councillor Vergara is quite right. Public interest is difficult to define. Public interest will be different in different places, but clearly public interest in Hunters Hill is about preserving the character of our municipality, however you define it. And as for the other suggestion that it's 3.3 protects us appropriately, clause 3.3 doesn't even comply with council's community engagement strategy. If you recall, earlier in this term, I've moved to amend that strategy so that the minimum level was consultation. The policy talks about notification, two different things. Consultation is essential. The policy has to be approved in that area. As for the Mossman policy, I accept Councillor Vergara's point that it only applies to road reserves. But I have done a comparison, and I don't see why Councillor Vergara would ask people not to take any notice of the report that I prepared. There is a lot to it. And at the end, there is a comparison with the Mossman policy. And the Mossman policy does attempt to provide an explanation of what the public good is for their community. We're perfectly capable of doing that also. It also states objectives, and they have a very strong objective that aligns pretty much with what Councillor Williams is saying. They say, as a matter of principle, council does not support the leasing or sale of road reserves where, consistent with this policy, a road reserve can be sold or leased. Council would prefer the lease rather than sale. Again, this aligns with what a number of the speakers were talking about tonight, and that is not losing the possession of that land forevermore. And then in terms of detail, I know Councillor Prieston gave information about what Australian Law Reform Commission has said about this. The points I made, and this is not drafting. I mean, I've respected the wish of the General Manager that we do not attempt to amend the policy ourselves. My idea is that it should be reviewed, and someone with appropriate expertise should do that review. I mean, if I were in the position of others, I mean, I might bring up Dominic Johnson, the Mayor or the General Manager of Boston, and ask who did their work and whether they would mind if we borrowed some of it. The Mossman policy could just about be adopted to Hunters Hill with the addition of items like land other than road reserves, and referring to the Lanco River and Parramatta River rather than Middle Harbour and Sydney Harbour, and saying a little bit more about heritage. To my reading, it is an excellent policy. And the other thing is, it does cover financial considerations far better than we do. It does make the point that land, a small parcel of land added to a bigger one, can make a huge difference to the development potential of that land. And whoever does the valuation should be able to assess that. I could go on, but it's probably a bit pointless at this point in time. I know where this motion is going to go. And it saddens me that we won't review something just because it's relatively new. To my mind, it is well and truly in need of review. In terms of the process by which it was adapted or adopted, I was very disappointed. Having worked in this area for quite some time, trying to develop policy, we were counsel on it, as I think I say at the start of my report. We received this draft report on Monday, the 9th of May, as I recall, and it was in confidence, so none of us could say anything about it until such time as it appeared in the business paper for the next meeting. So that was basically, I think, Wednesday. I think the business paper probably arrived that month. And then council had to vote on it on the following Monday. Now, that's not consultation. We appear to be just doing what we think is appropriate, not bringing community along with us. In my view, as a councillor, I'm a community councillor. If we're going to take action, we're talking to you at every level. We don't ignore you like that in the creation of policies, particularly a policy like this, which, in my view, has a gaping hole in it in terms of the process to deal with the service or infrastructure providers. I don't know, probably wasting my time saying any more, but I'm very disappointed. I think the approach of not having a review of policy is a bit head in the sand, if you like. I guess this will be going down, but I'm extremely disappointed.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. I would suggest that we are all around this table community councillors. Can I, that being the end of the debate, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. The foreshadowed motion now becomes the motion. Councillor Quinn.
So, Mr. Mayor, I want to move that council prepare and maintain a list for parcels of land it may wish to dispose of in accordance with council's disposal of council land policy.
Councillor Quinn, is there a seconder or perhaps a suggestion of amendment? But do we have a seconder first?
Well, you probably need to second it and then amend it or foreshadow something else.
Councillor Crassoy, did I see your hand in the air?
Second,
I'll just wait to see how this plays.
Okay, all right.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Vergara.
And I propose an amendment.
Yes.
So it's the wording I've sent to council, to the general manager today. So I thank Councillor Kathleen for bringing this motion, and I don't think because the policy is new, we shouldn't review it. I took the opportunity to read in detail the paper, the footnotes, the policy, even the minutes of the meeting at which the policy was passed. And I did reflect on some of the points made, and the amendments I'd like to propose are addition of a new section in the policy. And this is why I asked Dr. Sharp the question. I was hoping to get support for this proposed amendment. It wasn't to be adversarial. So the proposal I'd like to make is to insert a section which is for capital A, which is before section 5. It's where the potential purchaser owns land abutting the land to be disposed of. Subparagraph 1, the valuation to determine sale price shall be carried out on an added value basis to the adjoining land. The before and after method of valuation shall be used to determine the enhancement value to the adjoining land, and the difference shall be taken into account to determine the estimated value of the land to be disposed of to the purchaser. And sub 2, all of council's disposal costs are to be met by the potential purchaser and should become payable before council incurs those costs. So I took on board the opportunity to review the policy.
Sorry, Councillor Vergara, before you do,
That's
Councillor, yep, so that now becomes the motion and you can,
speak for it.
yes.
I took on board the opportunity to review the policy. I thought they were two things which could be tightened, that they were things in the community's interest as a whole. And that's why I'm putting forward those amendments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Quinn, did you want to speak to your motion at all? First, I'm sorry, apologies.
Mr. Mayor, I think, and I 100% agree with the motivation that Councillor Sanderson has been behind Councillor Sanderson's proposal of his motion tonight. In regards to the specific detail that we're dealing with now in this motion, I want to know what all the pieces of land are, so that, you know, I personally, first of all, can go through them all and say, maybe, no way, whatever it might be. And then ultimately council then can come to a position. The position that the council comes to might be that we're not going to sell it. Might be, subject to what's on that list and what the foreseen uses are of those pieces of land in the future. But until we have that solid piece of data, and I know it has existed in the past, and I haven't got a copy of the former one 10 years ago. I'd love to see what the most up-to-date,
I recall it.
the most up-to-date version is, so that we can then start to make have some preliminary consideration, so that we don't end up where we are now, frankly, after what's happened with 10 Lloyd Avenue and Bland Street. You know, I think what we had there was a lack of process and a lack of transparency and a lack of appropriate consideration of the community's views in those two particular matters. So let's see what we've got, what we do own, and then let's start to have the conversation about what could be on a short list, if there is going to be anything on the short list.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers for?
Mr. Mayor, could the motion be read out, please?
Yes.
Because that's my hearing of it's different to what we're now being told.
If I can get the motion on the screen. The motion moved by Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor Vergara, that number 1 policy, the council prepare and maintain a list of parcels of land that they may wish to dispose of in accordance with the council disposal of land policy, and that the amended section 2, which becomes part 4A, which is where
I've got that bit.
Yep.
Councillor Quinn's.
Okay, so Mr Mayor, I sense what councillor Williams is saying. If we can go back, I'm going to amend what I put in. So the council prepare a list of parcels of land, council-owned land, including any parcels of land that it may blah, blah, blah. So we want everything. before we decide on the short list.
Councillor Williams, you're comfortable with the part 2A and B that was proposed by Councillor Vergara?
Oh, well,
Or do you want them read?
no, I'm fine with those. I just wanted
Yes.
to address where I saw
Yes.
the inconsistency.
Any other speakers for? The mover is Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Vergara. Against? For? Right to reply, Councillor Quinn?
No, I think.
Okay, yep. See, you missed your chance, Chip. Okay, yes.
Look, I thank Councillor Vergara for those amendments that does address one of my deep concerns on the valuation side, but I still regret that the others didn't get up.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Quinn, right to reply? No. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is unanimous. Now move to item 4.1, external audit and adoption of general purpose financial statements for the year ending 30th of June 2022. I believe we have the auditor online. We might have the auditor online. The auditor is coming to answer any questions that you may have with regards to the financial statements as prepared and listed in the report. You got your Luke?
Yes.
Yes. Councillors, any questions of Luke prior to the adoption of the audited statements? Might have been a long wait for not a lot of action. Luke, sorry. Any questions, councillors? No? No? Have I got a mover of the motion? Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Quinn. Any discussion? No?
I'll just make the obvious.
Councillor Williams.
The obvious one, Mr Mayor, thank you to the staff for the reports and which clearly have come up with a clean bill of health with the auditors. So congratulations to the staff.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think that's echoed by all the councillors. Any other speakers? For, against? Luke, you've gotten off very lightly tonight. You should have been here 10 minutes ago. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is unanimous. I now move to item 4.2, Councillor Facilities and Expenses Policy. Do I have a mover? Councillor Quinn, seconded by Councillor Prieston. Any discussion, Councillor Quinn? If not, all those in favour? Against? That is unanimous. Now move to Christmas New Year council closure and 2023 ordinary council meeting dates on page 214. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sanderson, seconded Councillor Prieston. Any discussion? Not, I'll pull the motion. Those in favour? Against? I think that's unanimous, Councillor Crassoy. Yes, yep. Exhibition of the draft code of meeting practice, item 4.4. We have a speaker for this item, Dr. Alastair Sharp. Second bite of the cherry, Dr. Sharp, you have 3 minutes.
Council's recommendation is to endorse this draft code tonight and place it without amendment on exhibition. Although I haven't yet read through all 45 pages of the draft code and compared it with the 35 pages of the current code, I have noticed some matters which I think will raise an unnecessarily high level of opposition if the motion were adopted tonight. So I ask you to amend the draft before putting it on exhibition. The particular thing that upsets me, which is really what I'm doing right now, There's a proposal to merge the ability of the public to address the council meeting. To replace this with a preliminary forum, possibly not even in person, possibly merely audio visual, rob the public of its ability to communicate face to face with council. That's a core component of democracy. That's going to create a lot of unnecessary opposition from the public. Therefore, I call on council to amend the draft, retaining the ability of the public to address council directly before putting new codes on its solution.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Just in relation to your last point, was not my reading of the policy that we would be excluding anyone from the public from attending meetings. Could I just get the general manager? Yes. Could I just get the general manager to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Sharp. I'll just get the Executive Officer of Governance to come here, who's the author of this report. I have to confess, Dr. Sharp, I'm struggling to understand where you've got concerns of that. There's nothing in that policy that says you can't address the council meeting.
Like there's a form which attaches it to address.
I assume that you would have read it, and I don't.
Well, I'm respectfully,
Councillor Sharp.
respectfully,
Mr.
I
Sharp.
haven't notified you. I haven't made a note of the particular paragraph.
okay, I'll just get the Executive Officer of Governance to join us.
My understanding is that it says there will be a meeting before the council meeting, a forum, or some word, before the council meeting, and the public will be allowed to address that forum. It doesn't say the councils will be present. I think it says one person, named one person. It doesn't say that all councils will be present, and it says that it doesn't even have to be in person. It can be already connected, and I think that is a huge loss of democratic process. I will oppose it, but I think it's unwise to put it out there and create, we saw tonight how much time was taken up for people not happy with the way council was proceeding. We're going to create a lot of extra opposition unnecessarily by leaving that in.
Sure.
The question.
Well, sorry, Councillor Vergara, I just would like the general manager and officers to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Sharp, I just want to stress out, in 4.1, it says may hold a public forum prior to a council meeting, but I'll let the Executive Officer elaborate.
Thank you, General Manager, and through the General Manager and through the Chair. And thank you, Dr. Sharp, for coming to speak on this item. I let you, if I may, I let you do clause 4.1 on page 8 of the document. It refers to the fact that council may hold a public forum prior to each ordinary meeting of the council for the purpose of hearing oral submissions from members of the public on items of business to be considered at the meeting. Public forums may also be held prior to extraordinary council meetings and meetings of committees of the council. And 4.2 also leads to the point that you made around public forums may be held via audio visual link. So my understanding is that the intent is to allow greater participation from members of the public, particularly for those that aren't necessarily able to attend council meetings in person. And that is I guess a theme of the model code from the Office of Local Government, trying to make it a little bit more accessible for those that may not be able to come into a council meeting.
But I think later on it says council may still allow the public to address council meetings. There's no right to address the council.
I might suggest, Dr. Sharp, that there is probably no appetite in this council to stop people addressing council meetings. But Councillor Quinn.
Sorry, just
Any question? Sorry.
I was wanting to point out clause 4.5.
Yeah.
A
person may apply to speak, not council may allow a person to speak. A person may apply to speak on no more than 2 items of business on the agenda of the council meeting.
And that is no different to our current policy.
Yes, correct. That is our current policy.
So you're speaking here tonight based on the same reference in our current policy. Yeah. So it's actually adding another layer of presentation before a meeting. No loss, no, it's actually a net gain. Can I suggest?
And I would reiterate again, I don't think that there will be any appetite amongst these councillors to have any other, to restrict anyone's access to being able to address council. And it's certainly not mine.
Okay, I'd like to see you right. Because I'm not accusing you lot.
I think that where there might be a little confusion is that the model code that is released by the Office of Local Government does have a lot of these types of forums and things in them, and we have to respond to the model code and then add our and personalise it for Huntersville Council. But Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, my concern, aligning with Dr. Sharp's, is that we appear to have adopted the model code, which is for a forum before the meeting, but we have lost the existing 4.1 and 4.2 from the code of meeting practice, or we will lose, right? That from the code of meeting practice, or is that?
Is it a question for Dr. Sharp?
It's a question for the gentleman.
Okay, is there any other questions of Dr. Sharp? If not, thank you, Dr. Sharp. Councillor Sanderson, you have a question of the General Manager.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mayoral, I'll refer to this. I'll allow the author of the report to respond.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Sanderson. So what I would say is that, and you've highlighted the section where under the model code, it is actually what's been placed in front of you are the non-mandatory provisions as part of the public participation section. So I've got 4.1 and 4.2 in front of me of the current code, which obviously is much more brief than what is proposed in the model code or to be put on exhibition. But I also look at the point that is made that in the appendices, in substance of the current code, in substance, I would say those, guidelines before somebody addresses a public meeting have been sort of surmised in what's going to be put on public exhibition. I don't think that there is anything there that is sort of preventing people from, addressing public meetings or anything of that nature. I believe the minutes or the amount of time that people are allowed to speak for are the same. And the guidelines, the current guidelines, are attached to the end of this particular document.
So that with the proposal, someone, as we had today, will be able to come in and actually speak during the council meeting as opposed to before it.
Well, technically they can do both.
That's as you pointed out quite rightly, but in the short period of time that I've been here, it's those items that have come before council or have often dealt with at the start of the meeting, or it just may be a technical issue there that you may wish to.
Yeah, with respect, I just want a straight answer. Will we still have addresses as we saw tonight before a motion is considered by council?
Okay, so the note says quite clearly, public forum should not be held as part of a council or committee meeting. Council or committee meetings should be reserved for decision making by the council or committee of council. Where a public forum is held as part of a council or committee meeting, it must be conducted in accordance with the other requirements of this code relating to the conduct of council and committee meetings. That's on page 10 of the document.
But there is nothing, going to Councillor Sanderson's point, precluding members of the public addressing council meetings.
It sounded to me that meeting was over.
No. Well, I'm hearing from the General Manager. No, it's not. And equally,
it must be.
Councillor Sanderson, please. Equally, we only need to have the prior forum if council decides to have the prior forum, which we may opt not to do.
Through the chair, through the General Manager, I also alert Councillor Sanderson to clause 4.25 that any member of the public seeking to address a meeting shall complete and lodge the appropriate form, request to address council or committee meeting Appendix 1. Before addressing the meeting, the request to address council or committee meeting form clearly establishes the conditions and qualifications under which permission is granted to address a meeting and requires a person to accept those requirements.
which essentially is no change
No
to
change.
what you've seen tonight. Sorry, councillor Quinn.
Mr Mayor, one significant change I will point out, and I just need to stress that there is nothing personal in what I'm about to say, but in the model, as I understand it, it is saying that if we adopt this, any decisions about who can speak at a meeting are the decision of the general manager, not a decision of the mayor, which is a substantial change.
Yeah.
So I just think that's something, I noticed that was in the model and it hasn't been in the previous models that we had. So that's been a substantial change in position by local government, New South Wales, or whoever's drafted this document. And therefore, that's one that we should.
I'm happy to take any suggestions, but maybe that could be done through the process of sorry, councillors, through the process of the review that's going to be undertaken after public exhibition. Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Mr Mayor, could I move the motion with some amendments? These were distributed electronically, so to all councillors, so they should have been seen. What I would like to do is change point 1 of the motion to starting at Council 1, endorse the draft code of meeting practice attached to this report, see attachment 1, with the following amendments. A, that additional clause 3.39 be inserted to require the proceedings of a pre-meeting briefing session to be reported to council in any later business paper. B, the clause 4.1 to 4.25 be replaced with clauses 4.1 and 4.2 of the current code of meeting practice. That clause 5.9 be corrected to refer to clause 5.8. B, that the notice below clause 5.32 be corrected to refer to clause 5.32. E, that clause 5.36 be replaced with clause 5.21 of the current code of meeting practice, which provides a recording of each meeting of the council and its committee of the committee of council is to be retained on council's website for at least 4 years as opposed to 1, and be available on application beyond that time. Recordings of meetings may be disposed of in accordance with State Records Act 1998. If the clause 8.1 retain the order of business given in clause 8.1 of the current code of meeting practice to reflect the current practice, and G, that the numbering of clauses 11.4, 11.5 be corrected. Otherwise, the meeting would be, otherwise the motion would be the same.
Councillor question, point of clarification, if I may, Councillor Sanderson. So when you've got a recording of each meeting, are you talking about like minutes of, or are you talking about
that section is within the section to do with audio visual recording of the meeting, so it would only apply to the audio visual. This was something that came up in the last term of council when we had to deal with the first model code of conduct, and I wanted to see them retained 4 years because I thought that was appropriate during the 4-year term of council, and that I also wanted to be available on application beyond that. And the General Manager at that time, Mr. Barry Smith, recommended the reference to the State Records Act.
Understood. But because we're not currently doing that, we're not currently recording all the committee meetings.
No.
Okay.
But that's consistent with what it's saying. But there's a distinction in that the committee of council doesn't include most of our councils. They're advisory committees.
Right. Oh, I see what you mean.
So, Councillor Sanderson, you're saying that the committee meetings would not be required to be recorded audiovisually? That's just in there.
No,
okay.
Look at the definition.
I think of all the committees that are not held in this room and the equipment and logistics of that. So
no, the committee meeting, it's got to contain all. The committee has to have all the council's members.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, respectfully to Councillor Williams, I know he has got his hand up there. Could I just have a moment to provide some information to councillors that I think is important in the context of this, Mr. Mayor?
Manager.
So thank you to Councillor Williams. At a recent briefing session, he pointed out, which in the spirit of transparency, I was completely unaware of, and I'm sure you'll respect why that I don't go back and read resolutions from 2015. But I did after Councillor Williams pointed out. So just for the benefit of information for the councillors in your consideration of this paper. So pertaining to Councillor Sanderson, we're referring here that an additional clause be inserted to require the proceedings of pre-meeting briefing sessions to be reported to council in a later business paper. I just want to provide for council's information that there is actually a resolution on the books of council. Now, Councillor Williams wasn't a councillor at the time, but he actually spoke to this paper at the night. Councillor Quinn and Councillor Miles were on council at that time. So I'll just read this to you quickly. It was resolved unanimously in 2015 that the agenda for council workshops and briefings conducted prior to an ordinary meeting be published and made available to the public along with the business paper. Members of the public be allowed to speak at ordinary meetings on topics that have been discussed prior to the briefing during council workshops. The procedure in workshops section of the Hutters Hill Code of Meeting Practice should state A, there should be no opinion and debate on issues and projects, and B, questions should aim to clarify facts and not explicit opinion. And 4, a brief summary of issues discussed be included in a formal report to council. So I just want councillors to be aware that that actually is a resolution of council. Hence, clause A here is essentially echoing that resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, General Manager. So just to be clear, you've moved the motion with amendments, seconded Councillor Williams. Do you want to speak to the motion? Sorry, yeah, I've got a couple, but yes, Councillor Prieston.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
yes.
General Manager, I just want to know if the proposed amendment at 1A would contravene the Code of Meeting Practice at 3.33, being that pre-meeting briefing sessions are to be held. I know that we've just talked about this.
Yes.
Motion in 2015. So I don't know if this is relevant, or I'm concerned then that this policy, this Code of Meeting Practice, which was adopted in 2019, then failed to consider the motion that was resolved in council in 2015, because that seems contradictory to me, that the pre-meeting briefing session should be held in the absence of the public, but then
No, I think
I'm not saying that for or against it. I just want to know, would that cause an issue?
Yeah. Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just please, if you have a different view on this issue, but in the drafting of their code, their model code, respectfully, the local government is not going to take in consideration a resolution of council pertaining to that. They're going to come up with broad principles. So the answer is no, they wouldn't have taken consideration the resolution of that motion.
Could I just add to further to what, sorry, Councillor Prince?
Yeah, I just elaborate. I just want to know, would it cause
conflict?
General
Manager.
Well, I'm just trying to point out, and I'm trying to get us the right outcome here, that objectively, it would be my professional view that the resolution actually takes care of A, because I've got an obligation to adhere to that resolution that's on council's book. So the resolution, to me, regardless of what the practice says, is that I've got an obligation to deliver that resolution.
Councillor Preston, you got any other questions?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just concerned that we're in breach of the content,
Yes,
but yeah.
Councillor Williams. Question?
In light of what the General Manager's just said, through you to the General Manager, isn't it neater to clarify it in the Code of Meeting Practice rather than just leave it as a resolution? We'll get this
General Manager.
Theoretically, I don't have an issue with that, Mr. Mayor. It's not my decision. It's your decision. But I think the intent is very similar.
Councillor Sanderson, I just wonder whether there are some substantial and then some insubstantial components to your the drafting issues that I think probably could have just been sent to staff to add to the amended code once it's gone out in public exhibition. But essentially, you want for the don't want the glasses off that we are replacing or reinserting clauses 4.1, 4.2, which is the current code of meeting practice clauses. You don't want the agenda to be changed to the model code agenda, which, you know, puts committees, I think, before resolutions and business of council, etc. The other ones all seem like drafting notes that can just be added.
Just for the to make the
General Manager.
the executive officer governance would just like to provide some more feedback.
Thank you, General Manager, through the chair. So, Councillor Sanderson, I think your point A is something look, can go either way. I acknowledge what Councillor Williams says, but also the General Manager has pointed to the resolution which is on the books currently. And I note that 3.39 is drafted by Councillor Sanderson is not part of the model code. In terms of 4.1 to 4.25 be replaced with 4.1 and 4.2, again, they're non-mandatory provisions. Now, I alert you all councillors to page 408 of the agenda, which is OLG Circular 2135 dated 29th of October 2021, which states, and I quote, the non-mandatory provisions also operate to set a benchmark based on what OLG, the Office of Local Government, sees as best practice for the relevant area of practice. So a substantial departure away from that, what are the non-mandatory provisions? You need to take that into account as councillors. It's up to you ultimately what you decide, but take into account that guidance from the Office of Government is what I would say there. The remaining ones, I would say that C, that's no problem. D, no problem. F is up to you entirely. That's not for me to say. G, no problem. E, I don't see an issue there. Only that, and I can't speak for the IT staff, but the wording around and be available on application beyond that time is a little open-ended. And I'm not sure, because I can tell you that these files are quite large. So if there's some, and again, the guidance from the previous General Manager around recordings of meetings may be disclosed of in accordance with the State Records Act, I think that is much more prudent than having something open-ended. But the minimum requirement should be compliance with the State Records Act.
Thank you, Sue. So there's nothing in here that varies from the model code, the compulsory model code components.
The model code, as I understand it, and I'll just make it's 12 months. So you'd be going above and beyond that, which is I think totally fine. If council were to adopt provisions or clauses that were inconsistent with the mandatory code, I'd be raising that.
Thank you. Councillors, any more questions? If not, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, again, with the amendments I proposed, I think it's far tidier, as I always believe, to have something in a plan of management or a code rather than just rely on motions, because a motion can be amended at any time. So I hope we're all in agreement on that. As with respect to 4.1 to 4.25 being replaced by clauses 1.1, or sorry, 4.1, 4.2 of the existing code, I went back and had a look at the model code of meeting practice that was around in 2018. it's almost identical to the one in 2021. There have been a few changes here and there. There's one specifically like ICAC has asked us to put in, and but we did this in with some debate back in 2018, and it brought about no problem. So I see the situation as being exactly the same. I think the idea of a public forum that people come and address, which would probably be an hour before a meeting, with no requirement for councillors to attend, is a little unfair. I would rather make sure that the current arrangements exist. I would therefore advocate that we remain with our clauses 4.1 and 4.2 as per the existing clause. C is a mere correction, as is D. We've spoken about E, and I think it's a matter of transparency. In preparing my earlier notice of motion this week, I went onto the Mossman website, and they actually had difficulty finding stuff that was more than a year old. I mean, we're elected to council for 4 years. I think it's appropriate that we should be able to search back for 4 years and, see every word that each of us has uttered in council in the time we've been in here in the last term. So I see that's entirely appropriate. With respect to 8.1, I don't see there's any reason to change our current order of business. And having a look at the model code, it is perfectly okay. It does give you the freedom to adapt the wording that they use. So I therefore advocate that we remain with what we have. And again, G is simply a technical correction rather than anything substantive. So I hope you're all in agreement on that.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson.
Councillor
Quinn.
Mr Mayor, if I may. So if we go to clause E, I was hearing from the governance officer that that beyond 4 year piece was a concern. So at the moment, that's still in there. I understood that the suggestion was that it just finished with at least 4 years. We run into IT maintenance problems with anything longer than 4 years. Is that as I heard it correctly?
Again, no, I'm definitely not an IT professional, but I can tell you, sitting after the meetings, that these are very large files.
Yeah.
And so available on an application beyond that time, I really commend this council for its historical records. Like, I mean, it's quite impressive. But to have something open-ended, I think, whether that requires extra IT resource, I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, because there would still be the minute record of those meetings, for longer.
Couple hundred years.
Yeah. Therefore, do we need to keep the recordings as well? I'm just conscious we're going to need to.
Can I foreshadow an amendment to the motion?
If you'd like. You could move an amendment to the motion or foreshadow a alternate motion.
Well, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion then.
Yes. If you propose an amendment, maybe Councillor Sanderson and Williams will accept it into the motion.
Well, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager, before I do this, I'd just like to hear the 2015 resolution of council again, if possible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just take a liberty here for a moment before I answer that? We are in good fortune that we actually do have the IT manager here. So would you like?
If yes. If it pleases the General Manager.
So through you, General Manager, there could be ongoing cost implications if we were to retain video files that size for a long period of time, in particularly when a lot of things are moving to the cloud, and the costs are going to be huge if we were to retain them indefinitely. I think, as you mentioned before, just if we were to take away the and be available on application beyond that time, it would potentially be okay.
Thank you.
Councillors?
Councillor Priestley.
Councillor Priestley.
You wish me to read this again?
Yes, thank you, just before I.
Okay, so meeting 4375 in March 2015 resolved on the motion of Councillor Bird, second Councillor McLaughlin, and this was carried unanimously. 1, the agenda for council workshops and briefings conducted prior to an ordinary meeting be published and made available to the public along with the business paper. 2, members of the public be allowed to speak at ordinary meetings on topics that have been discussed prior to the meeting during council workshops and briefings. 3, the procedure in workshop section of the Hunters Hill Code of Meeting Practice should state A, there should be no opinion and debate on issues and projects, and B, questions should aim to clarify facts and not elicit opinion. 4, a brief summary of issues discussed be included in a formal report to council. And I'm happy tomorrow to send you the link to these minutes. It's a public document.
Yeah. My only concern is that the first resolution in that meeting was that only the agenda of the workshops and the briefings is contained in the business paper, but then it says that the public can come and speak to business that went on during the private briefing. So how would the public know? Would they just be then drawing upon maybe Councillor Quinn and?
I would imagine that the excerpt of what was discussed would be an item on the agenda of the council meeting, and any member of the public at any time could choose to speak to, whatever was on that agenda. That was the intent at the time. Councillor Quinn probably remembers as well, but
Yeah, that's pretty much.
that's how I remember.
Their decisions weren't made at those meetings.
Yeah.
Well,
And there was no minutes taken of a private briefing that were then put into the business paper.
No. Most commonly they were legal briefings.
Yeah.
Or other similar sort of matters to what we've been having briefings on.
Yeah. So if I could just have the amendment back up on the screen, I'd like to propose the motion. I'd like to propose an amendment. So at A, I think.
Point A, yep.
So rather than inserted to require the proceedings of the pre-meeting briefing sessions, I think we should say in addition to clause 3.39 be inserted to require the agenda of pre-meeting briefing sessions to be reported to council in a later business paper. And then I'd like to stipulate that then, I don't have the proper words for it, but then that the public can speak to items of the agenda.
That I think that would be captured anyway in the fact that if it's an item on the business paper, anyone can address council.
And then I have a second amendment.
Yes.
If you scroll up, please, sure. And scroll down slightly. To remove the words following at least 4 years from and to the full stop. And everything else, in my view, can be retained.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Vergara. Councillor Williams, you okay with those to be added, or?
No, could I suggest an alternative second one? Would satisfy.
Maybe as a suggestion, yes.
And that would be. Let's go to the printed version of that.
So just before you do, Councillor Sandon, it is slightly moot given that the recordings are uploaded onto YouTube because they're on YouTube. So they're not. This is I am assuming for our internal storage of those video files, but all council meetings are live cast and then uploaded onto YouTube.
Well, I was going to suggest rather than Councillor Priestman's amendment that can be available on application subject to their availability.
Councillor Preston, you okay with that?
No, just given the advice of the IT manager and the governance manager, I think we're already departing by an extensive period of time from the code proposed by LG New South Wales. Well, it says 1 year and we're making.
Councillor Vergara, got a question?
Comment. The provision of documents and their availability isn't a meeting code thing. We've got a policy which deals with that. Someone can make a request for it. So I think you just leave it out. It's not really the substance of the meeting code of practice. We do have a policy for application for information. It could be.
Thank you, Councillor Vergara.
Is that under
Thank you.
an FOI?
Councillor Preston, through the chair, if you will. That's been moved and seconded, not accepted by the mover and seconder of the original motion. That is the amendment we're debating. Councillor Preston, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
I think I've said everything I need to say, but just in summary, I think I proposed the first amendment because it aligns with the motion that was put forward and with the motion that was put forward and resolved unanimously by the council in 2015. And then I proposed the second amendment because of the advice brought forward to us tonight by the IT manager and the governance director that we might have A, IT issues involved with storage, B, incur additional costs for the extended storage of the video of council meetings, notwithstanding the fact that we will be retaining minutes for a longer period of time, and also that they're quite big files, so it causes internal issues, and also because we're departing already from the guidelines put forward by the state. So,
thank you, Councillor. Any speakers against? Councillor Sanderson.
If Councillor Williams will agree, I will accept the second amendment, but I will not accept the first. I would rather not be voting on both amendments in the one, so accept number 2, but I have concern with the amendment, the first amendment suggests to point 1. We would be reporting more if we were to report the proceedings rather than the mere agenda. I think the public has a right to have some idea about what goes on in those briefings. In fact, I've got a long history with this stuff. I mean, it was my amendments that had a significant bearing on this current code of meeting practice. And I think the councillors at that time will remember that meeting well. And Councillor Williams, I think I proposed a series of amendments. What was proposed, and I think the only one that failed was one that was to do with opening up those briefings to the general public, unless it was what was being discussed was something of a genuinely confidential nature. That was the only proposal that we lost. But I think it's important that the public knows something about what's going on in those briefings, and I think it's far better to publish something about the proceedings rather than the mere agenda.
Councillor Sanderson, are you comfortable with item 2 becoming going into the original motion?
Councillor Sanderson on Councillor.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I've got no problem with the second point, but I would like to speak against.
Okay.
can I ask a quick question?
You may.
What would, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager or maybe to the Director of Governance, not sure, what would be the process then that we would have to follow at the pre-meeting briefing session to ensure that everything was, all the proceedings, as we put it, or as Councillor Sanderson put it in this motion, were documented so that we could then publish them in the business paper to then
General Manager
provide to the public?
So here. Through the General Manager and through the Chair. So on page 219 of the business paper, but it's also in the code of meetings that is to be exhibited. It should be noted that the proposed clause 3.37 states that councillors must not use pre-meeting briefing sessions to debate or make preliminary decisions on items of business they are being briefed on.
and any debate and decision-making must be left to the formal council or committee meeting at which the item of business is to be considered.
Yes, but what I'm talking about is a bit more administrative. So would we then have to employ staff to work at the briefing, to take minutes as we do in an ordinary meeting of council, to then print them, publish them, have them in a booklet prepared for council at the next ordinary meeting for then the public to have access to?
I know what my answer to that is, but that would represent a potential conflict, so I have to leave that.
I think the answer is probably yes. Councillor Williams, have you got a question or are you speaking?
Question through.
Question.
the General Manager. I've kindly been given this by Councillor Preston by the General Manager, which is the resolution of council, and part 4 of that resolution is not to have full minutes provided to the report to council. A brief summary of issues discussed be included in a formal report to council. No use just having the agenda. I think people have to have some context. What do you think? Is a brief summary something that would be difficult?
So,
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll try to address both Councillor Preston and Councillor Williams' question. So, there would be no intent on my part to have those meetings minuted. And an obvious example of that is there could be privileged legal information that is provided.
Correct.
At that briefing. I think in the spirit of the intent of the wording, and it's subjective of how you interpret a word, but in the exact wording there, and I don't have the paper down, Councillor Williams, you've got it, but a brief summary of what I would see that you would provide a very concise, for argument's sake, couple of paragraphs that enhance what the agenda said. That's how I would interpret it.
Okay, so then can I propose an amendment again?
No, not until this has been debated.
Well,
Because then I think-
Are you wanting to change the word agenda?
Yes, because then it should reflect what is.
You can amend the amendment that you have proposed if the seconder is comfortable.
Yes.
What are you proposing to change first?
I propose to change the word agenda. An additional clause 3.39 inserted
A
to
summary of the
require, yeah.
A summary.
Well, it
Brief
should,
summary.
it would be like the agenda with a summary underneath. Anyway, whatever. To require
an annotated agenda.
Yes, that's exactly what I think this.
I assume that the second is happy with annotated agenda.
The annotated, oh no, sorry, require an annotated agenda, which includes a brief summary of proceedings.
I don't think you need those.
I don't think you need to.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Vergara?
Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Williams, would you like to adopt that into the motion?
No, because I think
Mr. Mayor, I'd probably like to add those words that Councillor Preston was continuing on with. It adds value to what we're talking about. It's the context that people need to know, not just that something's been talked about.
So you're not happy to put it into the motion?
Well, I'm happy. Well, it's Mr. Mayor, it's progressing to where I want to be, but the wording is not what I would agree to.
Okay, which is not wanting it to be in the motion. Councillor Preston, do you want to speak to your amendment?
No.
Councillor Vergara? Sorry, any speakers against? Councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to clarify the position that I have. It's very clear, and you can debate over the word annotate, but to most people, a brief summary is more relevant. I guess if you're a legal person, annotate might mean something, but if you're the residents in Hunters Hill, a brief summary does need to know. So I have a problem with the wording. The reason I put the proposition to council back in 2015 was that briefings, in my mind, used to be, or the information in briefings used to be incorporated into the council meeting. If there was a consultant or further evidence around an issue, it was always included in the council meeting so the public could hear the information that the councillors were relying on to make their decisions. The modern council today seems to want to exclude the community from the information process. And I used to, in the last term of council, annoy the mayor, Councillor Bennett, by using the term secret briefings. And because they are secret, the community has no exposure to what is discussed there. And I might add, at the last briefing, it turned into a bit of a farce. The council was trying to make a decision and have a vote on an issue. And I find that is totally contrary. And if the matter was like the council meeting, popped up on YouTube so the residents could see the information councillors getting, the facts that they're relying on their decisions, it would then tidy up the way council behaves at these briefings. I think transparency, scrutiny is essential in every aspect of council's business. At the moment, I don't think our briefings provide that. And our community, I believe, expects us to be open and transparent. And I have at least the intent of the motion back in 2015 built into our code of meeting practice. The community would have some assurance that that's the way that we would go. I'd go one step further. I'd throw this up on YouTube so that people can see that information if they wish to. Of course, confidential matters, as it is in council meeting, wouldn't be exposed to the public. But the vast majority of these briefing sessions are about detail, or should be about detail, and about information and context. I think the community deserves to be able to access that. So I can't support the word annotate, but I would support the intent and the wording that we've got in the original motion approved by council back in 2015.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Any other speakers for?
I'll speak for Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor
Frankly,
Quinn.
I find it absurd that we're spending so much time debating such detail about something where the intent is clear. I've just looked on the internet, the word annotate is quite clear what it means. And the word annotate will do what we're seeking to do. So I think it more than adequately covers the intent of what we're trying to get out there for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Any other speakers against or Councillor Vergara?
Just going back to what the governance director said, that this provision, I understand, is not in the model code. It's not a mandatory provision, and it's not a non-mandatory provision. And the non-mandatory provisions are what the OLG sees as best practice in the relevant area of practice. So relying on what the experts say is best practice, I think we've actually kind of gone above and beyond what is best practice. So I'm happy with the
Thank you, Councillor Vergara. Any other speakers for Councillor against?
Mr.
For
Mayor.
Councillor Crassoy.
Sorry,
I did almost see you before, but Councillor Vergara beat you to it.
Yeah, you'll have to forgive me. I've been up since 4 o'clock, so I'm fading fast, Mr. Mayor. But I would just like, I should have said point of order a little while ago. And when Councillor Williams said the modern council wants to exclude the community, I'd like him to withdraw that comment, Mr. Mayor, as a point of order. I think that's probably not a very fair comment to make.
Councillor Williams?
No.
I would note, Councillor Crassoy, that the model code does actually specifically include the wording that the public is not to be in those briefings. I have no issue with the annotated version going on the website, but the OLG has specifically in the model code said that briefings of council are to be done as the council body and the staff of council.
And therefore, using the modern council of wanting to exclude the community is inappropriate.
Councillor Vergara.
Remake the point of order made by Councillor Crassoy. In that context, I think it is an issue that ought to be withdrawn.
Councillor Williams, I will offer you the chance to withdraw that comment.
No.
Councillors, we've got a motion on the floor. We've had 2 points of order. I'm in your hands as to where to go. We can continue debate.
No,
or
I-
a procedural motion can be moved.
Procedure motion that we vote on this motion.
That we vote on the motion on the, or that we vote on the censuring. On the
Amended motion.
on the amended motion. Okay. Move that we vote on the motion at hand. Is it seconded?
This is the amendment.
This is no. This is the procedural motion to vote on the motion, which is seconded. Councillor Quinn. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. I put the amendment to the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. We are back to the amended motion becomes the motion. We are now back to square one. Any other speakers for? Against? Right of reply, Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, a lot of debate, but I think it's worthwhile. I think our codes of meeting practice are very important. I put a lot of time into it last time around. Didn't have the opportunity. We probably should have been discussing it sooner in the process than we were. But I'm pleased, relatively speaking, with the outcome and recommend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is unanimous. Councillors, I will now ask that whether we are comfortable moving items 4.5 through to 4.16, being exhibition of the draft code of conduct, disclosure of interest returns, councillors and designated persons, council summary of council investments, 30 September 2022, DAs determined under delegated authority in September 2022, development applications determined under the Development Control Unit in September 2022, development applications determined at the local planning panel in September 2022, report on legal matters September 2022, report on status of LEP DCP review, events for 2023, minutes of the Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting held 15th of September, minutes of Bushland Management Advisory Committee meeting held 12th of September, minutes of the Conservation Advisory Panel meeting held 21st of September 2022. Do I have are we comfortable to move that block?
So you're not including 4.7?
I'm not, including 4.17.
So, sorry, what was it?
4.5 through to 4.16. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Prieston.
I'd like to speak on the Bushland Management Advisory Committee.
It's been moved and seconded, Councillor Sanderson.
Happy to.
You're happy to remove 4.15. So just for clarity, we are voting to move as a block 4.5 through to 4.14 and 4.16. Yes. Moved, seconded. Is there debate? If not, all those in favour? Against? That is carried. Item 4.15, minutes of Bushland Management Advisory Committee meeting held 12 September 2022. Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are a couple of important things that are raised. One of them I referred to earlier, and that's the statement of that committee to say that even tiny parcels of land have biodiversity value where a tree can be planted. The other thing that came up at that meeting was the emergence of spanning crops. There's an example of that in one of the brush plots across the road from here. It is understood that that's being sold by various outlets. And I think that's a matter that should probably be addressed in some of council's communications to the public about what a potential nuisance Spanish moss is. And
I like the Spanish moss.
Try to dissuade people from planting it.
Isn't it?
No.
Doesn't just grow in the air.
It grows everywhere. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. I've got a seconder for the minutes. Councillor Williams, any other debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Item 4.17, minutes of the Huntersville Local Area Traffic Committee held 15th of September 2022. There are three written statements that have been provided. Councillors, do you want to take a moment to read those statements again?
I've read them.
No? I'll take them as read. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Prieston, seconded.
So, well, I think we just need, so be sure that everyone's considered those two, particularly the two objections regarding.
Yeah.
Now, it's regarding the location of the
Speed cushions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to
Councillor,
read these
sorry.
out.
General Manager.
So there's three submissions that have been requested around Foss Street, which is referenced in the minutes of the committee. First submission to be read out is from Sarah Massey, and to state the obvious, all of these residents are residents of Foss Street. Sarah Massey, today, Wednesday, October 12, which obviously is retrospective, I became aware of the council meeting regarding speed cushions on Foss Street, Hunters Hill. I have lived at 1 Foss Street for over 5 years. During this time, I have witnessed rat running down the narrow street to beat traffic build up or to rush to a secure spot on the street, which is limited. I support the addition of speed bumps on Foss Street. While the safety issues on the street have been an ongoing issue for me, given there is no footpath and in brackets or nature strip on our side, my concern has increased significantly given I have an 18-month-old son. I have raised issues with council regarding Foss Street and its condition in the past, specifically due to an incident whereby I fell into a pothole on the road with my newborn baby in my arms due to the lack of footpath and safety measures while walking on the road and the overall condition on the road. In regard to the specific issue of safety on Foss Street, walking and driving out of our house/driveway, we have limited visibility on the left-hand side looking out onto Foss Street due to the wall that separates our property with the car park directly next door. Multiple times, I've had cars screech to a halt when I edge out of my driveway and walk out of the driveway. It is important to note that we do not have a nature strip on our side of the street, therefore increasing the risk when leaving our property. There is no barrier between our property and the road, increasing the risk and likelihood that if a car, in brackets speeding or not, is driving down our street, we could be hit, in brackets, especially if we were walking off our property via our driveway. Given that our son is now walking, there is a significant risk and one I need to raise formally of council due to the amount of cars that drive down our street, even at the current 50-kilometre limit. The impact of a car hitting my son or myself would be critical. The risk further emphasises the need for cars to slow down on Foss Street with the implementation of speed humps. Right, the second submission is from Dr. Sarah Offen. Her statement is, we support vehicle speed control to protect all pedestrians using Foss Street, which has no pedestrian footpaths. However, we would like to request a minor variation to the location of the speed cushion. We live at number 2 Foss Street, shown on the current proposal of council to be the location of a 2x2 metre speed cushion. We are elderly. My husband, 82 years, has increasing mobility issues. We need to retain flat pedestrian access to our property through our front gates and also accessibility to our carpool. Although difficult, we park vehicles on the south side and a considerable drop into a wide open drain on the north side. Locating a speed cushion in inverted commas adjacent to Foss Street, close inverted commas, that is somewhere along our boundary may restrict that accessibility. Therefore, we request that the location of the speed cushion is not located directly adjacent to number 2 Foss Street, but instead either further east towards Ferry Street, in brackets, if necessary, overlapping our eastern boundary by no more than 1 metre, close brackets, or further west, again overlapping our boundary no more than 1 metre. We would greatly appreciate the council giving due consideration, it says tour, but I assume it means our, due consideration to our concerns about accessibility and our suggestion for relocation of the speed cushion. Sarah and Ray Offen. The final submission is from Mr. Nick Gorman from 4 Foss Street. My name is Nick Gorman. I am the owner occupier of 4 Foss Street, Hunters Hill. I initiated this motion some 12 to 18 months ago. Foss Street is not a safe street. There are no public footpaths on Foss Street, so all pedestrian traffic must be on the road itself. The street itself is narrow and steep. In the afternoon, drivers head directly into the setting westerly sun. I work from home full time, so I see speeding cars every day on Foss Street. It is frightening. Most of these cars are not local. They are usually tradespeople or traffic attempting to avoid bottlenecks on Alexandra Street created by school drop-offs at the Hunters Hill Primary. There is also a large number of P-platers from the Marist Sisters School in Woolwich who also use our street as a bypass to avoid traffic build-up. In our family, we have 3 children under 7. The road is simply not safe for them or any other children on our street. The same can be said for elderly residents who must also walk along the road. It is only a matter of time before there is a serious accident. The same can also be said for any residents driving in and out of their driveways. The council have installed some signs, but they've had little effect. Speed cushions are a great solution and will achieve the desired result. We only moved into the area at the start of 21. We have been told that there have been several attempts by residents to slow traffic, but no agreement has ever been reached with council. I implore this council to support this installation. As I said earlier, there will be serious accident if nothing is done. Thank you very much, Nick Coleman.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Quinn.
So the only one there really is the people at number 2 Foss Street. So I just suggest that perhaps the council officer go out there and see if we can slightly adjust what's proposed in the plan so that it's not exactly as it is.
Would you like that to be a formal motion, or would
Yes.
you? Yes. Yep.
So we've got the resolution there. I mean, this is simply a receive and note.
Yes.
But we'd also add that council consult with residents at number 2 Foss Street to identify the appropriate location.
Let's just get that wording correct.
Consultation about speed bumps.
My understanding is they were all letterboxed prior to this coming to the local traffic committee. So I'm happy to move that the report be received and noted, and that council consult.
So council currently says.
Oh, sorry, the recommendation.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
It said be adopted.
Yes, be adopted with
the following amendment.
With a variation to resolution 198/22. As follows, that council consult the residents at number 2 Foss Street regarding the precise location of the speed bump adjacent to number 2 Foss Street.
Also, there's just a
Councillor Preston.
sorry, there's just a typo. It's not Ellesmere Street, it's Ellesmere Avenue.
That can be amended, that's fine. Councillor, you comfortable with that? Yep. Got a seconder?
Talking to those people.
Seconded, Councillor Williams. Any debate?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add a comment.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Not so much debate, just to add comment, because the speed of cars generally in our community is often brought up. There's Prince Edward Street and there's rat running all over the suburb, and 50 on Fox Street is just too fast. At the last Movement and Transport Advisory Committee meeting, I think in the minutes that aren't here tonight, so they'll probably come to the next meeting, we did ask that the local area traffic committee be asked to explore the possibility of us being able to slow down some of our streets. Other suburbs have started to do it, and with the Transport for New South Wales movement and place frameworks, I think that there would be more flexibility around that. And I think there's huge swathes of Hunters Hill that just actually need to have a speed limit drop, full stop. Nothing to change in the motion, but just a comment that it would be great to see that advice sought at the next traffic meeting from the Transport for New South Wales staff that attend that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanderson, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments about the situation in Fox Street. I found it very interesting that the representative of Transport for New South Wales raised the issue of having a shared way, which I found amusing given the history of Bonifant Road. I wonder whether those sort of things should be seriously considered as a long-term solution if in fact we can obtain funding for them. The other thing I'd suggest in that area too, and this dates back a long time, because at that point in time, Councillor Quinn was the chair of the Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee, and I was a community member of it. One of the solutions we suggested in that area is because of the appalling lines of sight when you're exiting Ellesmere Avenue onto to Alexandra Street, there would be some potential to make Ellesmere Avenue one way at that intersection. And that's going to reduce or get it completely remove any reason for people to rack on through that particular street. So there's another option that I believe we should be exploring.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillors, any other discussion? Not.
The only thing
Sorry, Councillor Preston.
I have a comment to make on that point. I actually used to live in that house on the corner of Ellesmere Avenue and Alexander Street, and the garage is on Ellesmere. So it would mean that for those residents to exit the peninsula, they would have to go all the way around
Off the street and then up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only back to
I'm just saying, I'm sure they wouldn't be happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Preston. Councillor Quinn, right of reply? No. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Right, now move to item 7.1, response to councillors' questions. And item 7.2, which will require a resolution. But any items out of 7.1?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williams.
As a councillor around this table, I don't understand why I can't be told what quantity surveyors, this is relating to the question about the quantity surveying for the sports facility at Boronia Park. It's out to tender. I can't see why a councillor can't know what the quantity surveyor has said. We apparently have sufficient funds according to the fact that it's gone out to tender. Why can't we be shown what the figures are?
I'll pass to the General Manager, but before I do, the fact that we are out to tender on that facility and the seriousness with which we need to ensure that commercial in confidence documents like a QS report are being handled delicately. They're very serious issues in the middle of a tender process. General Manager.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williams, I'll probably just reiterate what I've said at the previous meeting and in my response is that a QS, to quote a QS number in an open public council meeting, provides information to people who are responding to the tender. Now, that would then be a risk of the commercial in confidence scenario of that tender process. I would suggest that is very straightforward.
Mr. Mayor, it's very straightforward that if there's a risk, then it should be done in committee of the whole. As a councillor, we deal with many issues in committee of the whole that have commercial in confidence, that have legal ramifications. Why can't I be told what that number is in the committee of the whole?
Well, that's through you, Mr. Mayor. That's your prerogative to seek that in the committee of the whole, Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, I will make the point that you have never asked for a QS report in the committee of the whole.
I don't have to. If I've asked for access to it, now if the General Manager thinks it's sensitive, then the appropriate response should be that, sorry, but I'm happy to do that in the committee of the whole. It's not my position to judge the sensitivity of it. I've asked for information and I'm quite happy to receive it in committee of the whole.
Can I ask a question?
Councillor Preston.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the General Manager, did you not at the last time this was raised, express to all councillors the reason why the figures haven't been released? And did you not suggest that it was because of the sensitivity of the issue being a competitive process?
Well, that's through you, Mr. Mayor. That's actually correct.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Williams, any other responses that you wanted from those questions?
No, it's just.
I move to item 7.2, which has a report attached to it. I ask if there's a move to that motion. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Quinn. Any discussion? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I thank the staff for this report. It clearly is an issue that in many levels is now intruding into our urban streets, whether it's shared vehicles, shared vehicles, or whether it's people taking opportunity through the internet process to be able to do business in our streets. So I guess it's about evidence. The suggestion's been raised. It probably won't be an isolated case. So it'd be good to get the issue considered, and so that we're better placed if this sort of on the street business or alleged on the street business is going to become more commonplace.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other debate? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just note this is another area where hopes seems to be impinging on our governance of our local government area. It would seem to be that in the definition of home business, AD includes retail sale of exposure after retail sale of items, whether goods or material, not purchase of dwelling or other online retail. That seems to be consistent with what it is, but it also seems to be at point A in there that it appears that you can employ two people in a home business. Now, that was never the case quite some time ago when my partner set up a business in our residence. So it's another area where, as we heard at the NESROC conference the other day from the Mayor of Hornsby, the Honourable Philip Ruddock, this is an area that clearly needs review. I mean, we've had a crack at it before, and maybe it's something we should contemplate again.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against, that is unanimous. Councillors, any other items of general business? Questions without notice can be handed to the front. If not, I declare the meeting closed at 9:06 p.m. Thank you, councillors, staff.
Thank you, councillors.
And those of you that stayed in the audience long enough. Our councillors,